The base is dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's January 21st. It's a Tuesday, which means we're taking your Tuesday thoughts on Twitter at Soccer Down here. There's all kinds of things to think about this morning, and we've got a lot of different things to dig into. One of those things is the front cover of the LA Times in the sports section with Chicharito on it, wearing the brand new LA Galaxy jersey. That's kind of a big deal, so be ready for this announcement to officially happen and shock everybody at some point today. That's according to lots of different people. Janusz Mihalik of ESPN and Fox had that last night, and the LA Times has got it right now, looking at it on Today NA. I don't know about the new jersey for the Galaxy, by the way. I'm not sure how I feel about this. John's extra salty this morning, so this is going to be a fun show. I learned why John is so salty these days. You want to tell everybody?
Well, there are multiple reasons.
Well, no, the overlying reason here of why you are salty has to do with your good friend Mountain Dew.
Oh, you want to get into that?
Because that's why you're salty. You can come up with every other excuse you want, but that's what it is.
Okay. Full disclosure, pulling back the fourth wall.
As I crack open a Red Bull just to drive you crazy.
I think you should. There you go.
I just did.
There you go. I heard it. Which flavor, by the way?
I'm on the peach this morning.
Okay. Full disclosure. We all have certain medications that we have to take first thing in the morning. And, mine are probably no different than a lot of folk. About a month ago, when I normally have my end-of-year physical, but that has been pushed back to Thursday because of scheduling problems last year, the physician's assistant looked at my LBs, and he wondered whether or not I was a fan of eating. And I told him carbs. And so he had recommended that I lose a few pounds. So since my eating habits really haven't necessarily changed a whole lot over time, I kind of pinned it down to one thing. The fact that the number of Mountain Dews that I have on a daily basis is probably on the north end of the bell curve from most of civilization.
I don't know. There's some people who might argue with that. People who used to always listen to.
Yes.
Extreme. I mean, that's basically a Mountain Dew commercial.
Yeah, it is, and we just needed Joey Styles there to help us out. But I took it upon myself, and I said, "Self, maybe you ought to trim back on that stuff." So it is safe to say that my daily intake of said beverage is pretty much cut in half. So what I do is I have it with me during the show and usually through lunch. The rest of the day I have retreated to the diet beverages. Still trying to figure out which one I'm going to stick with, but we do have a leader in the clubhouse that you'll be seeing in my hands a whole lot more of. So,
well, who's the leader in the clubhouse? You can go ahead and let everybody know. People might have opinions.
Well, maybe they'd like to sponsor the show too. Diet Dr. Pepper.
Sure, if we'll take a Diet Dr. Pepper sponsorship. I don't like the diet side of it. I like regular Dr. Pepper a lot, but
Yeah. So it is the closest thing to the actual beverage in my numerous samplings.
I have heard that from others too. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm chasing, because I tried to go after the Diet Mountain Dew, and it tasted like the can and the plastic that it was in. And I have, while I was in Florida last week, I tried the Mountain Dew Zero, and it has aspartame, and it is worse than the Diet Mountain Dew. So from a Mountain Dew connoisseur as myself, don't go within 30 miles of that product. It is just not good unless you really like aspartame. So Jason is attributing my extra added saltiness to a profound lack of Mountain Dew.
I think I nailed it.
Now in my system, or now not in my system.
So just keep that in mind. There's a caffeine adjustment going on in the show's mentality, and maybe there's a little extra saltiness. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Well, okay, and there's also something that appeared in the timeline that I want to address, and it was sent
see? This is what I'm talking
to me
about.
specifically, and I'm not going to be salty about it. The GHSA Bracket Challenge.
Oh, I saw this.
Came on Twitter about midnight and pointed out to me, literally called me out.
Yeah, they did.
And asked me, how boring is soccer as compared to high school football? Was this a topic in the show? Well, I'm going to make it a topic in the show.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
Right now.
Here we go.
Break it down!
Really? I feel like I need Seth and Amy here. How boring is soccer as compared to high school football? I will be the first person to sit here and say that I love all of my children equally. When it comes to schools and games and things like that, soccer to me is not boring. So for anyone to come at me and sit there and ask how boring is soccer as compared to high school football to me, it's tremendous, because I look at it from a bunch of different ways. I look at it from the idea of the community. I look at it from history. I look at it from the personalities. I look at it from friends that I have. Soccer for me is not boring. I'm still learning the sport, and I learn the history on a daily basis. I learn more things about it on a daily basis. For me, this is my master class. This is what I'm chasing when it comes to my PhD. To be able to do this on a daily basis, I get to learn every day. For me, that's a tremendous challenge. For me, being able to learn every day, it's something that I like at this point of my career. How boring is soccer? It's not boring. It is an amazingly talented group of individuals that are paired together, that have a common game plan, and it really can truly flow and float at times. When you can appreciate, if you can appreciate a pitcher's duel in baseball, you can appreciate good defense in soccer if you're not a soccer person. If you like offense when it comes to high school football, when it comes to any sport, when it comes to the strategy that's involved in that, I think you can like soccer just as much. So is soccer boring? No. Comparing it to high school football is an entirely different element. It still has some of the same off-the-field elements to it, but it is not boring, GHSA Bracket Challenge. I love all of my children equally. Thank you for asking this question. It is now a topic in the show, but soccer is not boring. End of statement.
Well, yeah, I'd hope not. I mean, one day people who don't like, whether it's soccer, whether it's football, whether it's baseball, basketball, hockey, a certain type of music, a certain restaurant, whatever, people will realize that it's okay to like what you like and just like what you like. Trashing other stuff doesn't actually help your opinion at all. It makes you look kind of petty and foolish, and especially when you say nonsense like this that's recycled from a Louis Grizzard column in 1983. I mean, the newspapers are on the internet now. You can actually read new stuff. You can actually come up with new opinions. But, you know, if you want to hold on to outdated stuff, go for it. Have fun. I'm glad they found Twitter. I'm glad they realized that phones can do more than be bricks in the dashboard of your car. And you can actually use them for a smartphone, and you can actually add an app called Twitter, and you can blast your horrible opinions everywhere you go. So have fun.
Boring.
Good job, guys. Anyway, you got John all fired up. It's good times.
Well, yeah, considering there's a lack of caffeine, the maids are coming to Office HD, so you'll be hearing Trooper more than normal. And someone decided to sit here disappointingly and ask me a comparison about how boring soccer is as compared to high school football. It doesn't help
the standing of high school football to trash another sport.
Don't drag really other things down just to try to prop yourself up, people. Come on.
It's funny. It's 1983 making a comeback. You know, I'm sure there are 8 tracks involved with that account's musical selections.
Harumph.
Yeah, good times. All right, so lots of stuff this morning. While you're all fired up, John, let's get your take on Michael Bradley. Injured his ankle at MLS Cup. That was early November. Signed a new contract with Toronto. That was mid-December. Yesterday was January 20th, and it was announced that he needed ankle surgery and he's going to miss 4 months. What?
Yeah.
How does this happen? And then, to add to the fun, Josie Altidore called out the club.
Yes.
Toronto, you might need to figure these things out. I did not see what Ali Curtis had to say, but this was another thing that was getting you going this morning.
Yes, that is accurate. So here is the double negative, highly protective, putting something out there for the sake of a soundbite covering both sides of the street and both lanes of traffic. So here we go. Ali Curtis, multiple paragraphs, so I'll try to go through it quickly. Quote, he stayed in Toronto for a tremendous part of the offseason, and we really tried to work with him on his rehab as much as possible to try to get him to a point where he's returning to play full strength. Ankles are finicky. Sometimes
I will agree with that. Ankles are finicky.
Sometimes they tend to take long to recover. You've got to be careful with those types of injuries, and surgery is the last resort typically in terms of what you want to do. Second paragraph is what I was getting to here in a second. So it will take probably approximately 4 months. So we have a double guessing adverb here, and I'm just getting started. A double hedging adverb. Now, that could be shorter or could be lengthier. Once again, a double hedge, depending upon how we manage that process. Of course, we'd love for him to be ready to go today, but that's not going to happen, end quote. So we had a double hedge in a soundbite about recovery time. Could be more, could be less, could be 4 months, probably approximately. Why did you wait this long?
That's the part I can't figure out, and that's the part where Josie Altidore is frustrated. That's the one that doesn't make sense to me because, look, I'm not a ankle doctor. I don't know what kind of injuries could have happened that would result in rehab. It doesn't go well, and then this level of surgery. I don't know, so I don't want to say they botched this. We don't know the details. It seems pretty strange that at this stage of a player's career, and Michael Bradley's got more time in his career, and Toronto signed him to a new deal, so obviously they're counting on that too, to potentially risk the start of the season doesn't seem to make any sense. If there's a question that surgery might be needed, you would think you'd go ahead and get that done and fix it. Now, I think the most confusing thing about it is there really hasn't been much coming out of MLS Cup itself about the injury. And that's where I'm a little confused is if it was this bad to where it could need surgery, why wasn't there more about it at that time?
Yeah.
Why wasn't it talked about? I mean, you didn't have to have an injury report afterwards and all those kinds of things, so I get it. He didn't come out of the match. He played the whole match. He played the whole 90. I don't know. This doesn't make a lot of sense. And now you've got a setback for Toronto FC, a team that is among the contenders in the Eastern Conference, and a team that desperately needs Michael Bradley. So you don't really have a like-for-like with the experience that Bradley has anywhere close. You've got Jonathan Osorio and Marky Delgado, who are more attack-minded. You have Liam Frazier, and I think long-term the idea is that Liam Frazier replaces Michael Bradley, and that might be 2-3 years. Frazier's been easing into time, and he's been playing. Well, he's going to have to play a lot early on, and that is going to be a bit of a work in progress. I think Frazier has the ability to be okay here, but I think Osorio and or Delgado are going to have to sit a little deeper, help him out. I think Toronto's going to have to be a little more conservative in the early going. I think it's going to be a lot of 3 holding midfielders sitting deeper, maybe picking a spot to go forward from Osorio or Delgado. And you're going to see a lot of Pozuelo and Altidore doing it themselves. And that's what Toronto's really going to have to do early on. Then when they get Bradley, and I don't know if, well, there's no way to even say the 4 months could be 3, it could be 5, I guess. It's anywhere in there, according to Ali Curtis. So when he's back, how long is it going to take them to adjust? Because then you can be a little more expansive. You can get more numbers forward because you have a player you can trust. But will he be back at his best? And that's at a player at this age, you never know that.
Yeah, and when you look at the other quotes surrounding it, Greg Vanney says he has firsthand experience with this injury, saying his daughter has suffered a similar issue from gymnastics, calling it a quote-unquote contact injury affecting the area between the ankle and the tibia, and that's the bone in the front. He says it's not easy to catch with a specialist not seeing the severity of the injury from initial images.
Huh. And I don't know. That's when you said the tibia, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's a little different." Because I didn't know if it was ligament, if it was bone chips, whatever. That's different. And look, we don't know. We're not in the training rooms. We don't know how this has gone down. And Bradley hasn't said anything, and I wouldn't expect him to. I wouldn't expect him to, throw anybody under the bus here like Josie did.
Yeah.
Which is an issue here because this has come up before, and it's something that Toronto's going to have to figure out what's going on here because they've recommitted to Bradley. Now he's injured for the first 4 months of the season. They recommitted to Josie Altidore. Now he's coming out and saying these kinds of things. Is everything okay in Toronto? Are there bigger issues that are maybe starting to bubble to the surface? I don't know. There shouldn't be, I don't think. I mean, you're talking about a top club. You're talking about a club with plenty of resources. You're talking about a club that has been to 3 of the last 4 MLS Cups. Pretty good things going on in Toronto. Why is this going on to start 2020?
Yeah.
It's very, very strange. I don't know. We'll pick Felipe Cardenas's brain about that and a number of other things as he joins us in about 10 minutes on the show, so stay tuned for that. Chicharito interview is available now at latimes.com. He gave his first official interview as a member of the LA Galaxy to columnist Dylan Hernandez, and it's official without being official, I guess. I guess that's where we're
unofficially
at.
Official.
It's an interesting way of doing it. But, as Jonathan Tannenwald pointed out, and this is key, this is front page news on the sports section, pushing the Lakers to the side, pushing Super Bowl to the side. Now, you don't have an LA team in it, but still, this is the big story of the day in Los Angeles. And to have that in the paper and have that kind of situation, Jonathan points it out. Why do I talk so often about the importance of MLS teams working well with their local newspapers? Boom. Mm-hmm. That's huge exposure. Here in Atlanta, we've seen that often. Again, that's a credit to the newspaper. It's a credit to the club. It's a credit to Doug that you have that relationship. Using the media to get these things out can be very strong. Making sure you get the proper placement in the media is a very important part of it. This whole unveiling has been a very weird deal, though. I don't know exactly how it's going to go down because you've got the interview coming out before anything official from the league, club, Sevilla, any of it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being strange here, but I don't remember it happening in this order before. Not like this.
No, and it's interesting. It's odd, but it's interesting. The fact that you have a pre-sign interview, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, where it's the great unveiling is done through the local paper instead of the traditional unveiling, fireworks, confetti cannons, everything at Dignity Health Sports Park. You get the holding of the scarf or the jersey and multilingual, press conferences and things like that. The order seems to be a bit out of order, I guess is the best way for me to put it.
Yeah, and look, a deal like this is going to be hard to keep quiet. I mean, that's obvious, but it's odd that this has gone out in the paper with the first official LA Galaxy interview from Chicharito before the club has announced they've acquired him.
Yes.
That doesn't, I don't think, ever happen. So how that happened here, I'm sure we'll hear about it. I mean, this is going to be the kind of move that gets a oral history of the actual deal itself. It's going to get an oral history of the coverage of the deal. It's going to get all of those things because it's that big of a deal. I've said it before. I will continue to say it. I think this is the biggest move MLS could have made for 2020. And I think it's the biggest move the Galaxy could make. I think there's other teams in the league that should have made it first, but maybe they weren't able to. Maybe Chicharito said, no, I don't want to go there, don't want to do that. I want to go to this club that is known worldwide, has had stars before, knows how to handle its stars, and also has a greater chance to have a good season in 2020. I mean, if you're looking at the option of Chicago or LA Galaxy, barring Chicago, backing up the Brinks truck, and even then, I think Chicharito would go to the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a team that will be a contender now for sure. They still got to get better defensively, but as big as Zlatan was, and it was a big deal for the league, this is far bigger. Far, far bigger. And I don't know if people who don't follow the game in Mexico know exactly how big this is going to be. I think people who might not pay attention to El Tri or Liga MX or just, the game in Spanish, I don't know if they get the magnitude of this. This is going to be incredibly massive. And it's a big opportunity for the league to continue to change the perception. And we'll get into it later in the show. There's a great piece over at Pro Soccer USA digging into that change. And 9 players from Liga MX coming to MLS in this window. That doesn't happen for no reason. People used to think that MLS was not the league that it is now. Now the money's good, the quality's good, the respect is there, the perception is there, and you're getting players who want to come here. Chicharito's coming from outside, but all of that factors into it. He said in the past he didn't want to make this move. His career's in a different place. He made the move to La Liga and Sevilla, and he hasn't broken through. I've never understood why Chicharito's been cast in the super sub role in his club career. It started at Manchester United and it's followed him everywhere. I don't get it. The guy's a goal scorer. He always has been. He's a hard worker. Don't know if there's stuff behind the scenes. Don't know any of that. Who knows? But on the field, he's delivered. And he's delivered in a, kind of complimentary role usually. Not going to be the case in Los Angeles. He will be the man, and he will be the focal point of the LA Galaxy, and he will be the focal point of Major League Soccer in Spanish-speaking media. And honestly, I think that's going to cross over now. Cuauhtemoc Blanco, when he came here, he was that guy. That was a long time ago in MLS speak. That felt like a different league, much smaller. Now, I think, one, you've got more media covering this league, and they're covering it at a deeper level than they've ever have in the past. So you're going to have more depth of coverage. But more importantly, I think you're getting more crossover between English and Spanish than you did when Blanco was here. I think when Blanco was here, you didn't really get the coverage of Cuauhtemoc Blanco and his effect on the Chicago Fire unless you were following it in Spanish.
Right.
Now that's not going to be the case with the Chicharito. he can be among the most famous athletes in the United States by playing here. I'm not holding back on that. I'm not qualifying that. He will be that big of a deal. And it's going to be an interesting one to follow. And I'm really looking at that crossover from Spanish-speaking media to English-speaking media. And I want to see how this goes outside of Los Angeles. I want to see how it goes in other markets. I want to see how fast the season opener sells out in Houston.
Yes.
Stuff like that. It's going to be a fascinating story to cover. We're going to get some coverage of it in just a second with Felipe Cardenas, who will be joining us after the break. Hang out with us. We'll be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here. We've wrangled up a guest at one of our favorites, Felipe Cardenas of The Athletic, pulling him away from writing about 50 different stories right now.
There's plenty to cover, isn't there? There's a lot to cover. And yeah, obviously MLS blowing up right now with Chicharito getting the LA Times treatment, as we were talking offline, that the club hasn't even announced it, and he's already out there in full gear, the new gear, the new 25 anniversary, 25th anniversary.
The previously unannounced.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to need you to do then, Felipe. To add to your list of many things to write is we need an oral history of how like either this interview or the media coverage has gone of this whole thing, because I think it's going to be a fascinating story to tell when all this is said and done. It's been the Chicharito watch, and I can't think of anything to compare it to in MLS history to this degree.
I mean, yeah, I think it's tough to say. I mean, you mentioned it before the break that, Cuauhtemoc Blanco was really big back in the early days of MLS, and you can go down the line with the types of players that have come in before MLS 3.0. I mean, and they tend to be Los Angeles Galaxy players. David Beckham. He was that guy. He was the guy that really changed the face of the league. And I think for a long time, no one thought anyone would have that type of appeal like David Beckham. No one will surpass David Beckham as far as what he meant to MLS, the type of star power that was arriving here in the US, his reasons for coming to MLS. And now it's like I'm slightly exaggerating, but it's like 2 or 3 seasons in a row, we have someone else that's doing the same thing or doing it bigger than David Beckham. So I think, yeah, it says a lot about the growth of the league. MLS still has a lot to do in order to stay relevant in such a huge market that is the U.S. sports. I think if we pretend that Major League Soccer is going to compete with the NFL, I think we're that's extremely far fetched. But they're climbing the ladder. Major League Soccer is climbing the ladder as far as where it stands in perhaps alongside the NHL, Major League Baseball. Even just, is it as big as the NBA? Probably not, but there are things that are very similar to what MLS does. The buzz around MLS signings, the buzz around international players that I think is similar to the NBA. But I think what Chicharito does, and this is something that Sam Stejskal wrote about last, I think it was Friday. It's big just for local markets as well. And I agree with him in the story that he wrote. MLS, they're fighting on two fronts. They want to be a big league. They want to be a global player. They want to be relevant, in the international transfer market, and they're making those strides. But locally, that is just as important for this league. Not every team has this type of support that Atlanta United has here, in this region, as far as the way that, reporters cover the team, the significance of the club among its fans, the success that it's had. And so, I think you go back to the LA Galaxy, which is the most successful MLS club to date. And even they needed, a big push. They needed 100%. This type of signing, to get back up to the levels that, just to be a big club in their own city, considering what LAFC has done, in the last 2 or 3 years. So big for MLS, big for Los Angeles, a great signing for the Galaxy. I go back to the conversation I had with GBS, with Bardo Escaloto, and, I go back and I read it. I read it last night, and he was just so honest. Without telling me what they were going to do, he told me what they were going to do, which I think is great. I think that more transparency in this league will go a long way. And so when he's telling me, yes, we want a striker that can play, that's not just finishing in the box like Zlatan. This is after he basically said, all the nice things you can possibly say about Zlatan, his significance both on the field, in the league, and in the locker room. But he's like, yeah, we want a guy that can play, that can play within the team. And he didn't shy away from saying we're going to look for somebody in Europe that has just as big, the same appeal as a player like Zlatan, Robbie Keane, and David Beckham. So I'd say that they got their guy.
I think, Felipe, when we look at this anticipated signing that has already been talked about in the press, when we're talking about Chicharito, I think that what we also have is an opportunity for media to sit there, and if you haven't hitched yourself to the wagon, I think that this is another opportunity to do it, and not just necessarily in the Los Angeles market, because you look at this kind of a star. Herculez Gomez has said that the signing of Chicharito blows the signing of Zlatan Ibrahimovic out of the water. And I think that this is another opportunity for folks who haven't watched MLS, followed MLS for whatever reason, storylines, personalities, what have you. I think that this is another one of those possibilities of a crossover moment, a transcendent moment that can attract others in to keeping an eye on MLS for the first time, because I've heard of this guy, and now you have another opportunity to do that.
Well, yeah, I think first of all, there's, the audience, the MLS audience is very diverse. And so I think one demographic that I'm sure Major League Soccer would love to continue to attract are bicultural Hispanics, bicultural young soccer fans that are dipping their toe in the league because maybe they've grown up following one specific team. They're a Club America fan, or they're a River Plate fan. but they've grown up in the States. They don't have any really real affinity to an MLS club. And that is a very attractive market. That's a target audience that the league would love to continue to reach out to, and they're doing that. I think the signing of a Chicharito does that. He's still, I think he's 31, possibly, but he's young, in the sense that he's very popular. In Mexico, he has like a pop culture aura around him. He's very popular on social media. He's into social media. He's bilingual from playing in Europe for so long. He can do the interviews in English and Spanish. He's going to bring attention to the league, to the team. And I think at the same time, it pushes other markets to follow suit and to see like, okay, this is what, if the Galaxy, again, not competing from a monetary sense with the Los Angeles Galaxy, but saying, well, they're doing something. They're getting more eyes on their club. The scrums on a Tuesday with Chicharito involved are even bigger. The reporters start pushing each other to who has the best story. And so I think it's just, in the end, it's a domino effect that helps the sport. Chicharito is he's not in his prime, but I think, Jason, you said it as well. It's like there's something around. There's this thing about him that
the aura.
Think he still brings it from the Mexican fan base.
Like, he's got that star power.
Yeah, he's a huge star. He's always been a star in Mexico. He's still, to this day, the leading Mexican striker, the striker with the most goals in the Premier League, which is significant in its own right. Not because there's been a long line of Mexican strikers that have played in the Premier League, but he's up there. He was a great player. And so what does that do? Well, I think it shows that, first of all, a type of player still in at that level can come here and play. And I think we all expect him to play. I think he can score 15 to 20 goals. Now the Galaxy have their guy that they can really, it's not necessarily build around because he's not a 23-year-old player, but they can put, pieces around him, younger players around him. They can start playing differently because they have such an experienced goal scorer that's going to be in the box ready to score.
Yeah, I think it's part of this evolution of MLS. It's interesting that Chicharito and Beckham, I think there's going to be a lot of parallels. You mentioned the star power, the pop culture. Now, Chicharito is that in a Spanish language sense, and Beckham was in the English language sense, but they both have crossover appeal to the other side, which is a big part of this. But they both come at the same age, too, at 31. It's not the last contract. I mean, Chicharito will have an opportunity to re-up with the Galaxy. I have not seen terms of the deal. I think it was expected to make him the most highest paid player in the league, around $6 million, but I don't know how many years. He'll have an opportunity to re-up. I mean, he's 31, and he's not a 31-year-old who's played a ton of minutes in his career.
Right.
So he'll have another contract. It wouldn't surprise me if he does end up back in Mexico for his last contract. Chivas has already made statements along those lines that they'd like to have that happen. He can go another 5-6 years. But he's a guy who is part of this evolution of Major League Soccer trying to become the dominant league in CONCACAF. Now, they haven't been able to do it on the field yet, and we'll see if that starts to happen. But off the field, with 9 players from Liga MX, big names too, I mean, big players who had big seasons last year come into MLS, and now Chicharito, it's a really interesting time in that battle off the field between MLS and Liga MX.
It is. It's a great little story that's starting to bubble up that I think will continue to be talked about in the next few weeks, leading up to the start of the MLS season. I know reporters in Mexico, I think Ruben Rodriguez, who I met during Gold Cup when I was covering Mexico, I think he works for Fox. He's put it out there already that there's a shift here where MLS clubs they're going to Mexico and they're not asking players to come here for a loan. They're buying players. They're going after the good players too. The players that are playing well in Mexico, not, hey, Do you need a break? Do you need a change of scenery? They're MLS teams are now know that they can go into Mexico if they have the funding to buy, a Cavallini to try to convince, a Gignac of coming over to MLS, or grabbing younger players that can come here and make an impact that look at Major League Soccer as a league that's competitive, as socially a place to live in America and try something new. But number one, the competition is there, and so that is interesting, because the only way, this is my opinion, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks this. If Major League Soccer and the top clubs want to continue, not even continue, if they want to just compete at the same level as the top Liga MX clubs, both in this region and just consistently in their own domestic league, they need to have that same type of talent. And so the Liga MX is rich with talent, with players, young, veteran, that understand how to play in tough competitions, that know the standard has to be high at all times. And, that's why you're seeing even clubs like Atlanta United shopping in Liga MX and swapping players and doing business with clubs there, because in my, just my personal opinion, I feel like they know if we want to compete in CONCACAF in the Champions League, we need players that just know how to get it done. And I think you'll continue to see that. There will be an increased competition for players and more transfers within the two leagues.
Speaking of Atlanta United, since you're there for opening day of camp, what were some of your takeaways from the appearance of everybody and having themselves being put in front of microphones for the first time this year 2 under Frank de Boer?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last story that I wrote last week was, covered that a little bit. Like I said in the piece, you're there, the rondos are going. There's some new players. You're asking around, who's that guy? Who's this guy? And the energy is there. It's like the first day of school. And when the players spoke to reporters, I feel like it's not scripted, but these are veteran players. They understand the questions that they're going to be asked. And there is a sense that they need to put the first year with Frank de Boer behind them. The issues, the problems they had, the fact that it took them, it was noticeable for them that they needed to adjust to a new coaching staff, new footballing ideas, and at the same time battling, CONCACAF competition while all that's going on. So my sense is that the players know that this is a big year for them, because they don't have that excuse anymore. They don't have the excuse of, we're just getting to know our coach. I think they understand now their mission is like, we need to get on the same page immediately. And they're looking at both the new players and the players that have been through this change from Tata Martino to Frank de Boer. Together, they need to, support each other. And, I spoke with Jeff Lorenowitz late last week for a story that I'm going to be writing today. And that's something he alluded to, that the new guys don't know anything except what they're seeing right now here at Atlanta United. And the veteran players need to understand that they need to stay together. They need to be on the same page. And I think that did come out from a few players, even Joseph Martinez, about like being on the same page early on, because they weren't to start the season last year. It took them a while. And then I think the one thing that they all sort of realized is that they started to play well late in the season. And so that is something to look, to jump off of, the style of play, the confidence that they had late in the season. So it was, in my opinion, a very typical first week of training. The players are saying all the right things, really, but at the same time, I think they're being candid in that, I wrote it before the first week of training. I'm like, this team can no longer say that, hey, we don't know what our coach wants from us, or the coach is still getting to know the players. And so for me, it was a breath of fresh air to hear it straight from them as well.
Yeah, let's build on that for a second. That's a really interesting aspect of going into year 4 of the club. I think even first year, obviously, nobody knows what Atlanta United's going to be and what it's going to feel like. Year 2 even had some of that. You're still figuring it out. Year 3, you had a new manager, which made it different, and again, kind of took you back to figuring it all out again. Now year 4, when you look at other clubs, and not just MLS, just clubs around the world, clubs have a culture, clubs have a feel, clubs have a vibe. You walk through the doors, you know what to expect. The best clubs do anyway. It sounds like, from what you're saying and what the players were saying, that you're starting to get to that point, that now the veterans have taken that on, especially the guys who have been here from day one, to define what Atlanta United is.
Yes, and I would agree that they're starting to figure it out. It's not because I think Atlanta United does have an identity as a club. There is a club culture, whether the manager is from Argentina or the manager is from Holland, the Netherlands. They've established that, but things can change in between when players come in, coaches come in, and I think being a new club, they wrestled with that a little bit because they're like, no, but we're this, we're an attacking team, or we're a counterattacking team, or we are a pressing team, or we're a full throttle vertical style type of club. They believe that, and they won like that. So it's tough to change that mentality. Going from Frank de Boer in his first year into now, to your point, Jason, I think, they're starting to find, okay, we can still have a little bit of that identity on the pitch, mixed with perhaps some new ideas, some new tactics, a little bit more flexibility, and that will become the new identity of this club under Frank de Boer. But it's not there yet. I don't think we know what it is yet, and I don't think the players do either. They're figuring that out. They're focused on figuring that out right now during training camp, so that when they get to that first match in Honduras against Motagua, they're not like, what are we doing? Are we playing 3 in the back? We just started practicing 3 in the back. No, we're going to do 4 in the back. They shouldn't have those issues. And so I think tactically and philosophically, there are 2 different types of challenges for a young club like Atlanta United that has had so much success, and a coaching staff that wants to continue this train that they're on, but still wants to tweak, still working under some, let's be honest, some challenges as far as roster building goes, and just schedule congestion. These are things that they're still trying to figure out. But I agree with you, Jason. I think year 4 for this club is, can they get back to that, the sense that Atlanta United is X. It's not XYZ, it's X. This is who we are. They, depending on an opponent or a specific time in a match, they're able to change the way they play. Fine. But that hardened identity that they carried with them the first 2 years, that really year 1, I thought year 1 was almost more important in that than year 2. Because year 2, as we know, Tata figured stuff out too. He knew that
year 2 on the field was different.
Yeah, he was like, okay, if I want to get through these playoffs, I need to change. I need to change a little bit how we set up. Players are going to have to do some different things for me. But year 1, it was like, the other day I saw an image of Miguel Almiron just like celebrating at Bobby Dodd. Mouth wide open. Still had a little bit of that fro, that early afro that he came into the league with. Greg Garza is behind him, just like going insane. You can see everyone in Bobby Dodd just like freaking out after a goal. I think it was Houston.
Yeah.
And I stared at that picture. I'm like, wow, like that was such a huge year for this club. And they didn't win it. They didn't win anything, but it was just like everyone knew that when Atlanta United was on the pitch, everyone knew what to expect. The opponents knew what to expect, and they backpedaled. And so I think Atlanta, they have the talent. I've said this on other shows. I've said it to my friends. I've said it to my colleagues. I still believe that Atlanta United has arguably the best roster in the league today as it stands. Whether or not they still need some pieces. I still believe they need a big time ball winner, in that central midfield position, a guy that can do a little bit more. But if I'm the front office and I'm like, okay, we're not going to spend $6 million on Matias Villasanti because that is his release clause. I spoke with his agent last week, and that's straight up what he told me, and that Cerro Porteño is tough to deal with. They won't change. They won't lower that release clause. Let's say Atlanta United says, we're not going to do that right now. We're not going to spend $6 million on a player. We're going to go with what we have. And if I'm the front office, I still look at my roster and I really like what I have. I know for fans, it could be tough to swallow because it's like, what? We didn't replace Nagbe. And to be honest, and to be fair, both manager and front office have been public about wanting to do that. But let's say they don't. I still look at that roster and I feel pretty good about myself. I feel pretty good about the talent that I have going into the start of the season.
So when it comes to the roster as it sits right now, who are you most looking forward to seeing their growth year to year when it comes to the folks who are in-house right now?
John, why you got to put me on the spot like that? There are a lot of players. I think the obvious answer is...
So then make it a long list, dude. I mean, it's perfectly fine. You can make it as long a list as you want. It's like, I'm looking forward to seeing A, B, C, D, and E. It didn't have to be one dude. Now, come on.
John's drinking less Mountain Dew, Felipe. I'm just going to warn you.
Are you sure? It sounds like he drank 2 liters of Mountain Dew.
No, he's having withdrawals. He's fired up.
Okay. No, listen, I think it's easy to say Miles Robinson, right? Because of where he is in his development, the fact that he's already been, he's officially now, he is a U.S. men's national team player, not a starter, may not be a starter for some time, but he is in the pool. He is going to be continue to get called up. He should be a focal point of the U23 Olympic qualifying team. It's a big moment for that age group and for the country to try to qualify for the Olympics for the first time, I think, since 2002 or something like that. So, Miles Robinson now not having the veteran presence next to him. I know Fernando Mesa is 29. I get that, but I just think that it's tough to replace Michael Parkhurst and LGP. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter what intangibles or the qualities that Fernando Mesa brings. I think he's going to be good for this team, but I think we can all agree that Miles Robinson really did benefit from playing with some very good veteran center backs alongside him. And so that's big. It's what does Miles Robinson do now that he's in his third year and he's going to start and he's going to be expected to do a little bit more, both on the ball and just mentally. His defensive awareness should continue to improve. Can he clean up the types of mistakes that he still makes? Young defenders that aren't coming from a professional European academy. He's a college-born player, so sometimes you see those mistakes. He makes up with it with his speed and athleticism, but I think those things need to be cleaned up. So Miles Robinson is the obvious answer. I also think Ezequiel Barco. I think he's a player that we all know what to expect. I've written it that, he could leave Atlanta United, leave MLS now. And it's an interesting story because you're going to think about, well, did he do enough to earn a $25 to $30 million transfer? Yeah, he has. Does that mean he's underperformed? Well, I wrote that statistically that he has, but I think we all know the talent that he has. So I think he's a player that I want to see still take us an additional step because he started to last season. And I think a little bit, he showed that he can carry the team. He did that at times last season. And I think if he has that same attitude, if he's not already looking at apartments in Lazio or Rome, exactly, apartments in Rome, they're both in Rome, those teams are in Rome. But if he's not already shopping for an apartment in Rome, and he has a guy next to him like P.T. Martinez that is going to be uber motivated as well, those two players can really elevate their play, elevate each other as well. So those are my three, because I think the rest of the players, I could go down the list. Eric Rometti, what is he going to do? What will he show? What kind of responsibility will he be given? But
I'll go off the board for one. I'll go with one I want to get your take on it. Somebody that I think could be a big surprise this year, Mo Adams. And I think Mo Adams gives you something that's very different out of those midfielders. He's probably the most pure defensive midfielder out of the group. I mean, you could put Jeff in that conversation, but he can also give you coverage on the back line, which might come into play this year at some point. Mo Adams, if he turns into a player that maybe not a starter, but a player who's going to be starting 10 to 15 games and coming off the bench in another 10 or 15, I think Frank de Boer trusts him, and I think using him late in games at the end of last season to close things out shows that maybe there's more in line for him.
I think that's a good shout. I don't know specifically, again, and I'm not disagreeing with you as far as how much Frank de Boer trusts Mo Adams, but I do 100% agree that he could be a guy that, let's say the club says we're not going to drop the $6 million on a number 6 or a box-to-box number 8. I wrote it the other day. That's one of the deepest position groups in this team. They have a lot of central midfielders that they can play with. And, someone asked me in one of the comment sections, what happens if they don't get Matias Villasanti? Who steps in? And I'm like, well, you have a lot of guys that can step in. You have guys like Eric Remedi that can do that job. I think it's just like a slight tweak in what you're asking them to do. And so since we're talking about Mo Adams, I agree. I think he's a good player. I think his
defensive ability.
Yeah, and I think he was a little bit unfairly put in a left wing back position against LAFC, expected to essentially mark as much as he could Carlos Vela. Even though he scored really early, it wasn't his natural position. It looked kind of awkward. The team looked awkward in that type of setup with certain players where they were. But when he's in the middle, he's very good on the ball. He does have, I think if I'm coaching Mo Adams and I tell him, I want you to crack some ankles. I want you to crack some ankles, get on the ball, distribute, stay disciplined positionally, and he can do that because he does have, he can get forward. I think we've seen that when he gets in the late in games, he's got on the ball, but he's going forward. And I think Atlanta has plenty of midfielders that can do that, and they need a couple guys that are fresh legs, good on the ball, and you're asking them to do a little bit different work. Because to your point, Jeff Lorenowitz has been exceptional the last 2 years in that role. Even late in the season in 2019, he was able to do that for the team. But he's not going to be there for 34 games. And so you have players like Eric Remedi, Mo Adams that can do it. You just have to ask them, I think, to change up pump the brakes a little bit and understand that in front of them, they've got players that can just go.
It's going to be interesting to see. You've got a lot of things coming up over at The Athletic. You want to tease anything to get people excited?
Tease.
I'm not known to be a tease, but I'll tease.
Felipe.
I'm sorry. Listen, so family show.
Not pursuing that open door.
I spoke to Jeff Lorenowitz. That's a story I'm going to be writing today. I think it's going to be a great story. We covered a lot. He's always one of the best interviews in the club. So that I'll be working on that. I will be in Miami tomorrow for Diego Alonso's press conference, the new Inter Miami manager. And from there are other things that I'm working on that once they're a little bit more concrete and I'm back on the show, happy to talk about them. But I think that my priority, as soon as we hang up, we're going to shut down and start writing that Lorenowitz story.
All right, I'm looking forward to reading it. Jeff's always a good interview, and you're really good at telling these stories with individuals. So love it with Jeff. Looking forward to the Alonso piece as well. Thanks, Felipe.
All right, guys, take it easy.
See you soon.
Good.
We're going to take a quick break, come back, reset for second hour of the show. Get your Tuesday thoughts in on Twitter at @SoccerDownHere. We'll be right back.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, January 21st. It's a Tuesday. We've got your Tuesday thoughts on Twitter. We'll be getting into those in hour number 2. If you've missed hour number 1, if you're joining us now at just after 10 o'clock, you can go back and listen on demand. You can listen to the podcast through your favorite podcatcher. Subscribe, whether it's on Apple, whether it's on Google Podcasts. Spotify is actually a really growing source for us. So if you like your podcasts on Spotify, you can subscribe to Soccer Down here. Put down February 15th in your calendar. We've got a big event coming up at Wild Heaven Brewery at the West End location. It's going to be a lunchtime event. We're going to do a big season preview getting ready for 2020. It's a few days before the trip to Honduras and CONCACAF Champions League. All kinds of fun stuff. We are raising money that day to get some equipment, some soccer equipment, to a middle school in Rex in Clayton County that is trying to launch a soccer program. I'm hearing this kind of stuff more and more and more in the last year or so. The soccer bug in the Atlanta area and honestly all over the Southeast is a real thing. You've got Parks and Rec departments starting soccer programs. You've got existing programs growing faster than they can handle. You've got schools that have never had soccer before that are trying to bring it to the next level. You've got middle schools especially that are launching programs. You know, you've had middle school sports have generally been limited to football and basketball. There's probably a few that have some kind of a baseball program or it's a feeder for a high school more than an independent program. Soccer's an area that you're starting to see middle school programming. Atlanta Public Schools has done it for a while. We helped get that started with Soccer in the Streets. Others are starting to get on board with it. And whether it's an in-school program, like an intramural kind of program, which is what this one will be in Rex, or a department, a district starting a middle school league, it's all starting to grow. And it's very cool to help some of these programs get started. So our event at Wild Heaven, West End on the 15th of February, we're trying to raise enough money to get 30 soccer balls, pennies, cones, a couple portable goals, the basics to help get them started. So would love to see y'all there to help us do that. We'll also have some special stuff, some cool stuff. We're working on some special guests, so stay tuned. That event's out on our Facebook page. Let us know if you can make it. We'd love to see you. John mumbled for a second, and then he disappeared.
Yeah. No, it's
No,
once
he's
again
back.
potential spam.
Okay.
There's something else that folks are talking about and have been talking about. Actually, there's two things, but they're somewhat interrelated.
Lots of things people are talking about.
They're really looking forward to the hat.
Well, the hat's real. The hat exists. I can actually put it on right now. It's pretty cool. I like it.
How does one get a hat like the one that you're wearing right now, sir?
Well, it is $25, and we have limited supply. So if you want one, you need to let us know you want one very quickly. Shoot us a message. We'll handle payment offline, and we will handle shipping offline. The first hats will be shipped this afternoon, and I will know how much the shipping will actually cost then. So stay tuned on that part of it. But if you're interested, shoot us a direct message on Twitter, on Instagram, whatever your social media platform of choice is, to give us a heads up, and we'll get you taken care of. We do have scarves. We even have a couple of beanies if you are interested in such a thing. Just a very small number of those. So give us a heads up. Let us know. We'll get you taken care of via PayPal preferred, but we'll find a way to take your money. That's what we do. And if you want to risk it and you want to wait, you can come get one at the Brew House next week. You can get one, if we have anything left, at the event at Wild Heaven, West End, and any other events coming up this year. We're at the Brew House every Monday, and we will be at the Monday the night before every Atlanta United match this season. The show is still to be named, although we've narrowed it down to 2 finalists. I think it's going to stay with 2 finalists. Kelly Francis is in charge of all that. So go vote in her poll on her Twitter at Kelly Francis, and we will see you for the Monday before the second leg of the Motagua series. Will be our first show. And for all the MLS matches, not CONCACAF, not Open Cup, which we're doing shows for, but all the MLS matches, we will have a pair of tickets to give away if you join us that day. So, all kinds of cool stuff coming up this year on the SDH network.
And also, we're doing the Game of the Week for high school.
Yes, we will be doing the high school Game of the Week, hopefully starting February 4th, getting some final dates confirmed and final locations confirmed. We do have one nailed down. We'll be heading up to Blairsville in early April on a Friday night. Most of these will be on Tuesday nights. This one will be a Friday night special between East Hall and Union County. And we'll have the girls' game and the boys' game. We'll do both. And we'll be doing both games everywhere we go. So it's going to be a lot of fun. You can listen to those games on the SDH network, the app, the website, on Spreaker. If you want to catch it later, you can. The high school game, like we said, about programs growing, the high school game is a big part of this. And there's a lot of talented players out there that are finding their way into college and into the professional game from Georgia who are starting in the high school section. But also, this is where the next generation of fans, administrators, coaches, referees, everybody that's going to help grow this game to another level. This is where they're coming from. You're getting big crowds at these games. You're getting a lot of excitement. You're getting student sections doing chants like the Hype Depot for Atlanta United, like other supporters groups. So you're getting that culture transferring over to the high schools. It's a lot of fun to see. Looking forward to all the games we're going to do. A lot of Metro Atlanta games, but we're going to get outside of the metro area too.
And apparently the alert that we have beanies has awakened Daniel Price this morning in his his wardrobe quests.
See, there you go. So we'll be getting these messages in. We'll start taking care of it this afternoon. So if you want one, shoot us a message. We will get it all sorted out. We'll get some shipments out this afternoon. I'll be heading to the post office, it sounds like.
And Bartimus Prime has wondered out loud if we need a sideline reporter for the Game of the Week.
I got to think about that one. We might be
as technology improves, I would say the answer is yes.
We might be able to find a way to make that work. We're going to get creative. Hey, we're trying to grow as much stuff as we can, so stay tuned.
All right, you want tweets?
Yes. Tweets.
All right. Let's start at the top of the order here. Five Stripe Daily. Who are your top Golden Spike candidates you'd like to see this year? Mine are El Tata and Miggy, hashtag Tuesday Thoughts. Side question, would Tata be too much drama with FDB?
No, there's no drama. I don't know why that's even a thought. I don't think that's been something that's been manufactured out there. Tata spoke very highly of Frank when he was here last summer for the Mexico game. I don't think there's any kind of drama. I wouldn't even worry about that. Miggy would be awesome if you can pull that off during the summer, but he's going to have a busy summer with Copa America, so don't know if he's going to be here for a stop or not.
Goldberg.
Cool. Who?
Goldberg for me.
That'd be cool. That would definitely get a cool reaction. If you're going to go down the wrestling road, I will
New
take.
Day.
Well, no, I mean you can just start naming wrestlers. Sure, that's easy. But I'm talking about people with an actual connection to soccer. I think Xavier Woods is a fan, at least of the FIFA games. I'll go Finn Balor if we're going down that road because he is a big Tottenham fan. So that would be cool. Other types of folks, there's still a lot in the music world you could do. T.I. hasn't done it yet. I don't think Andre 3000 would be down for it, but if he would, that would get a massive reaction. Let's see. Has Killer Mike done the Golden Spike? I know he's been at games. I know he's done stuff.
I don't
but
think he has.
I don't remember him doing the Golden Spike. He might have, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. Let's see. You've got the reformed Black Crows. You could do something with them.
But then the Robinson brothers might fight over it.
Well, you'd probably have to split it up, and then they'd have to share the third one, and they might hit each other over the head with it. Let's keep the reunion going. It's a good idea. Let's stay away from that one. You've got all kinds of actors coming through, so I don't know the filming schedule, but that's definitely something you could do.
Has Tyler Perry done it?
I don't think so. I don't think Tyler Perry has done it. I don't think so.
Okay. Just putting that out there.
Let's see. Dominique Wilkins has done it, right?
Yes. Dale Murphy's done it.
Dale Murphy's done it. Chipper Jones hasn't. So that would be one if you want to go to former Atlanta sports stars. You've got a lot of Falcons options. Who could you go to? I mean, you could go to current Falcons. You could get Matt Ryan or Julio Jones, and that'd be pretty cool. So there's a lot of different ways you could take it. I mean, the thing that's interesting about it is sometimes you get, like I mentioned, actors who are in town filming. Sometimes you get people in town and it just lines up. You know, sometimes it just works out, like Ron Howard. Like, nobody expected that one.
No.
That was kind of cool. Like, that was completely unexpected and exciting. So you're going to get some like that, too, which is very cool. So those are some of the ideas.
Shiva started the morning by getting a phone call from the Atlanta United tickets rep that told her that she'd have another 3 years before I can be offered a seat with a reasonable price. And then a crying emoji. Then, okay, I'll wait 3 years.
That waiting list is real. It's deep, and people are not giving up their tickets. So,
Tofka's in this morning. I find our roster to be far too shallow at the moment. 21 players by my count.
Wow. Now you're taking shots at Tofka?
No, I'm reading Tofka's. I'm reading his tweet.
That was a voice. That was a tone, sir.
I'm just relaying the anticipated tone of said tweet.
Okay, you're putting tone to it. I don't know if that was the tone that would have went with it.
Oh, come on.
I don't know. I'm not sure. You know, it could have been questioning. It could have been pensive. It could have went a lot of different directions. I think it's still early. I think it's still early in this process, and I'm not worried about the number. I'm looking at the overall depth, and I feel pretty good about the overall depth as it currently stands. You know, we went through it before, but you've got the 3 goalkeepers. You're good. You've got 2 obvious options on the left side, on the right side of the back line, with additional options if needed. You know, you've got Bello and Castillo on the left. You've got Escobar and Lennon on the right, and this is in a 4-man back line. Meza and Walks can both slide outside. You've got center back options in Robinson, Meza, Walks, Campbell, Lorenowitz. Maybe you might want one more there to give Campbell more time with the twos, to keep Jeff more in the midfield. Okay. Central midfield, we talked about it with Felipe. You've got a few different options with Heinemann, Lorenowitz, Remedi, Adams. Walks can factor in there. Meza could factor in there if needed. Gressel can factor in there. That's not even getting into the number 10 role, which you have a lot of options. I think if you're looking at areas of the roster that need a little more depth, Adam John could address one if that signing happens. We'll see. Out wide, more so on the left side, as a left winger in a 4-3-3, potentially. And Luis Fernando could end up being a guy who plays all over the front line. Same with Lagos Kunga. They're going to have the opportunity to step up. Now they've got to take it. Fernando is coming into his first full year on a first-team deal. Lagos Kunga is still on a homegrown deal. Spent last year mostly on loan in Memphis. Did well. Both of those guys have to show that you can count on them in these big moments. If they show that, I think you're pretty well covered in terms of depth across the roster. You can always get better, and that's a different conversation. I think depth-wise, you're pretty good. You've got pretty good cover across most of your positions. What I'm waiting to see is stuff like Villasanti, Arzamendia, those kinds of names that would not be depth pieces, that would be taking you up to another level. And to follow up on our conversation with Felipe in the first hour, one thing, if you're not familiar with release clauses, because it's not something we typically see with MLS players, Felipe mentioned a $6 million release clause on Villasanti. That doesn't mean Atlanta would have to pay $6 million to get him in a transfer. If you pay the release clause, there's no negotiation. That's basically the buy it now price. You're not haggling, you're not bidding. That's okay, we're going to pay that, we're going to negotiate directly with the player. Teams will sell for less than that sometimes. Now, if Cedro Porteño wants to play hardball, they don't have to sell for less than that. If you meet that price, then Cedro Porteño is out of the equation. That's why you set that release clause. You usually set it on the high end. We're seeing this right now play out reportedly with an offer for Juan Fernando Quintero from River Plate from Ajax. His release clause has been reported recently at $22 million. Ajax has offered 15. So you're going to try to find a way in the middle. Ajax doesn't want to pay 22. They're going to try to get him for cheaper. If Atlanta's after Villasanti, it would probably be the same thing. It's like, 6 is the release clause. We'll offer you 3. Okay, and then you start trying to find numbers. The major thing about Villasanti, Arzamendia, and Cedro Porteño as a whole, and Fernando Arce said this yesterday on radio in Paraguay, and it's been reported prior to this, so you've got a couple different unconnected links here. They need to sell. They need to bring in some revenue. So that ability for them to play hardball is mitigated a bit because they need to bring in some money in transfers. These are probably their 2 players that are going to attract the highest price and the most attention. So how long can they play hardball? We'll have to wait and see. But $6 million release clause is probably on the high side. Can you get him for less? That's what you'll have to wait and see if it happens. But it sounds like there's genuine interest in both of those players from Cedro Porteño. Atlanta United's been linked to both from different reports, but there's also been other unnamed MLS teams linked. There was a link at one point of Monterrey to Villasanti. I don't know if that's still accurate. Monterrey's made some other signings that might make that one a moot point.
The other thoughts from Tafka says 21 players by his count, excluding Gallagher, and Carlton. And you got into this. He says, if we could sign only one more player, who's that player, or at least what positional qualities does that player have? To be fair, we have a number of players who are proficient with more than one position, but by sheer bodies, I'm concerned.
I got 22 players, and I'm not looking at it by sheer bodies. I think the coverage is the most important thing, and it's not like you're, too deep at each spot. You're further deep than that. Now, you have some guys filling multiple roles, of course. I think you'll see, if you go up to 30, let's say, and you've got 22 right now, that's not including Gallagher, and it's not including Carlton, which has not been officially announced as of yet either. So 22, you've got 8 spots. Now, some of those are going to be reserve and supplemental spots, so it's either going to be homegrowns or other young signings that are on minimum kind of deals. So those are very hard to predict. Let's put those to the side. Not sure how many of those there'll be. Villasanti, for me, would be the biggest game changer that's out there. I actually don't put Arzamendia in that as a game changer for who Atlanta United is. Could he be a better option on the left side than Bello or Castillo? Sure. Does he make the team different? Not really. I think he's a better player right now today than what either one of those give you. Probably have to pay a little bit more for him too, because you're talking about a full Paraguayan international. Villasanti gives you something that you don't have as much of. I think he's a player, and this is again from research, not seeing full matches. There's not access on a regular basis, and after the deal was done, the archive of Copa Libertadores stuff with Cerro Porteño is unavailable. So I haven't seen full matches of him, but I've seen some extended highlights that are more than just goals and assists. I think he's a player that would be unique. He's not Darlington Nagbe. He's not Mo Adams, Jeff Lorenowitz, more on the defensive side. He's not Remedi Heinemann, who's more as a box-to-box. He's somewhere in between. He's a player who has played a lot of different roles for Cerro Porteño. In Copa Libertadores action against San Lorenzo, against River Plate, he played a little bit more as a true 6, as more of a deep-lying member of the midfield. In league action, in footage I've seen, he played a number of roles. He'd play more as an 8, pushing forward. He'd even play on the right side of a 4-4-2, kind of a narrow 4-4-2, not quite a diamond. It's still an empty bucket, 2 holding midfielders. But he'd play on the right side, and he could flare out wider, but he could also kind of tuck in and make it a little bit more of a 4-2-2-2. Think to what the North Carolina Courage played, for example, and what Philadelphia might end up playing some this year. He can do a number of those things, but I think he'd be most impactful for this team in that deeper role. And he'd give you a player that would be different than Mo Adams in that role, different than Jeff Lorenowitz in that role, and different than Eric Remedi in that role, the players that we've seen in that kind of role so far. He would be the biggest difference if you can pull that off. But as Fernando Arce said, as we all know, it's a free market, and there are going to be other teams who are interested, and there's going to be certain prices that Cerro Porteño is going to want to hit. There's going to be certain levels of a contract that his agent's going to want to hit, and those might not be able to be fit in a salary cap situation. So we'll have to wait and see on the timing of this. This is going to be a fascinating one to follow. This parallels a little bit of the situation that Garth Lagerwey is talking about in Seattle. Now, I've been a little harsh on Lagerwey, saying that there's moves that they can make even without the CBA done. I still hold to that. I think there are. I think you can't blame everything on the CBA with what their roster has changed from 19 to 20. I think there's so many holes for them, they can make moves. But if they want to make this level of move, it's a little complicated. And Sounder at Heart has a pretty good breakdown about the situation they're in, trying to get João Paulo. He's a midfielder from Botafogo in Brazil. They've been linked to him for a while. They're trying to make it work to where he wouldn't be a designated player. Now, they have a spot, so again, this is one that they could get done and then figure out the CBA ramifications. They can get this deal done. It's still a little bit more of make some moves because you don't have enough. You think Atlanta's roster looks thin. Go look at Seattle right now. Yeah. But here's the rundown that Sounder at Heart gives you. And this is not necessarily exactly how Villasanti would be in this situation, but I think there could be some parallels. So what they're trying to do, the Sounders would pay about $1.25 million spread out over 2 loan payments in 2020 and then be obligated, not option, but obligated to complete the purchase for another similarly structured payment in 2021. Now, Sounder at Heart speculates this. I'm just going to read what they write. While that doesn't leave a ton of room to avoid DP status under current rules, $1.53 million in cap hit per year, this may suggest some changes to the way the CBA handles those economics. Don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's just Seattle trying to keep a designated player slot open. Don't know. But that's an interesting thing to include here. And this is from Jeremiah Oshan, who is very plugged in, has written for the SB Nation Network for a long time. I'll be curious to see how this plays out. And I'll be curious to see, one, if Seattle gets this deal done, because he's a defensive midfielder that they need. And he's a similar type of player to what we just talked about with Villasanti. He's not necessarily just a pure 6. He can win the ball deep and push forward. He can carry the ball forward a little bit. Villasanti can do that as well. It's a twist on the defensive midfielder that we're starting to see more of. That means you're going to have to be in the right frame of mind if you're playing with that player, because if they step forward, somebody's got to drop and cover in case of transition. It can be really effective. We've seen it here in Atlanta when center backs have stepped forward. They're unaccounted for. If you have your holding midfielder do it, they're going to be unaccounted for by the opposition. Can create some great opportunities. Joao Paulo for Seattle could do the same things if they can get this deal done. I'll be curious to be watching this one and see if maybe there's some parallels to the way a Villasanti kind of deal could be handled. We'll have to wait and see. I think he's a player that Frank de Boer would love to have. I think he's a little bit of, that kind of multifaceted holding midfielder that you're seeing more and more of today. And he's a player that I think has a ton of potential. And he's just one that would give you something different. And that's not a knock on Arzamendia to say that he wouldn't be useful. He's obviously a very good player, and I think he would be very useful for any team in MLS, Atlanta United included. I think Villasanti gives you something different than what you already have.
Shiva in this morning, and it includes a red, angry-faced emoji.
Okay.
Chicharito will be here in 2021, right? Because the Galaxy is not coming to Atlanta nor Nashville in 2020.
You tell me how the schedule is going to work in next year. Nobody expected the way it worked this year, so I'm not making any predictions. There's no way to know. There's no guarantees of any of that anymore. Does this mean Atlanta United would play the teams that they didn't play this year? Is that a guarantee for next year? You would think that potentially it would, but then you also start thinking about TV matchups, and potentially it wouldn't. Does that mean Atlanta's never going to play Vancouver again? I mean, that's where we're getting into with this stuff, and that's not a good spot to be in. So I don't know. Even if you had the same setup from last year, Chicharito would not have been in Atlanta this year. The Galaxy were here last year. That wouldn't have happened. So can't fault him on that one. Now, Nashville, it's a new team. So they actually, wait a minute. No, they're in the West. So the Galaxy are in Nashville. They'll play in Nashville this year. So, yeah, if you want to go see Chicharito with the Galaxy, they'll be in Nashville. Yeah. Because they'll play everybody home and away. They're in the Western Conference. Yeah. I keep forgetting Nashville's in the Western Conference because it doesn't make any sense.
No.
But, yes, they will be there, and Chicharito will be there, and that will be a packed house.
Keaton Thomas in this morning. Which team or teams should we look out for that, in your mind, would give Atlanta United the most problems going into the 2020 season? Hashtag Tuesday Thoughts, hashtag Unite and Conquer.
Let's stay in the East, since these are the teams that you're going to be battling it out for playoff spots. Columbus is one, because Columbus has given Atlanta problems last year, and they're a better team. I think you have to throw the monsoon game out because that was nonsense. But Columbus came into the Benz late in the year when Atlanta was playing well and beat them. And that's something that has to make you think a little bit. Columbus is better this year, with a squad that has added a good bit to it. Lucas Zelarayan is your replacement for Higuain. Higuain was out last year when Columbus came here, and they still got the win because Pedro Santos tucked inside. I'm assuming Columbus will have a lineup like this. Eloy Room in goal. You get Milton Valenzuela back, that's a huge addition. He was injured all of last season. I think he did his ACL in preseason last year. Had a good first year in the league. He's a player that Atlanta tracked at one point. He's a Newell's Old Boys product. He's a young designated player. He's an outstanding left back. If he comes back fully fit, you're getting a potential all-star left back added to your team. It's like a big transfer that you didn't have to pay anything for. He's just back from injury. Center back, Mensah will be paired with one of Vito Vormgor, who's a new addition, Axel Schuberg, who's a new addition, Josh Williams, and Abubakar Keita, who have both been there. Williams is a solid veteran who can play anywhere on the back line. Keita is a young and up-and-coming center back, still got a lot to learn. Probably Vormgor will be the guy, and we'll have to see if he pairs up well with Mensah. Harrison Offal is back on the right side, gets forward really, really well. Little susceptible defensively, but gets forward really, really well. Midfield, who is Nagbe going to pair with? Is it Trapp? Is it Artur? Are you going to... There's really not a way to play the three to get everybody else in, so you're going to play two of them. It's been Trapp and Artur for years, but you don't give up what you did to get Nagbe if you're not going to play him. So who's the odd man out? That's my question. Wingers, Luis Diaz will be one of them. He came into the league and was very good last year for the Crew. I would assume it's Santos on the other wing, although you have Yunus Mokhtar, who was pretty good last year when he came over. He'll be battling for time. Zelarayan's your number 10. Jossie Zardes is a double-digit goal scorer in this league up top. That's a formidable team. I think Columbus could be the surprise that they don't have the big names of Atlanta, of Toronto, of New York City, but they could be right there with those three in the East. I'm looking at New England too, and a lot of it is how they finished last year. They've added a few pieces to that. I think Columbus is further ahead of New England, of that next team to challenge the top group. And with the Bradley injury and Toronto still needing to go out to the market to sign another designated player, and now they have to see if Liam Frazier is going to be the guy for a few months early on, or if they're going to be able to go out and get somebody. Maybe questions about Toronto in the early going. Now, they'll have Bradley back in plenty of time to make a playoff push, but in the regular season, Columbus, New England could pass them. And Columbus is the one that maybe worries me the most.
Tofka, since you mentioned Michael Bradley, says it sounds to me like perhaps the injury had a chance, in quotation marks, of healing without the need for surgery, and they wanted to try to avoid the knife, or that surgery may have a poor full recovery history. Perhaps it's all really just a hindsight is 2020. Shrug shoulder emoji.
Yeah, no telling. There's just no way to know. They tried to rehab it, and that's the most important thing here. So it's not like they just said, oh, no, you're good. Rub some dirt on it. You'll be fine. Put some ice on it. It'll be okay. They tried a rehab program that didn't work. That's a big misstep. And that might be what Josie Altidore is not happy with, is that they recognized something was wrong. So it's not that they missed it, but they didn't treat it the right way. Now, maybe they thought this would work and it just didn't. I don't know. But it feels like a big mistake to be in this situation. Mm-hmm. And as Tofka says, maybe it's just a risky surgery. Maybe it's something they didn't want to have to do. They hoped it would clear up. But Man, it doesn't look good at this point on day one of training camp for that to come out. It doesn't look good at all.
Austin Sims, you've covered a little bit of the topic, so I'll go to the second half of the question. If they bring in pieces, when do you believe a deadline is for them to get into the squad to be prepared for Champions League matches?
There's not one. This has been an ongoing conversation about deadlines and being prepared for CONCACAF. You can take this team right now into CONCACAF and you'll be just fine. You can take this team into the start of the season right now and you'll be just fine. When you can field a team, and let's even say that you want to ease Bello in, you can go with a 4-man back line of Castillo, Robinson, Meza, Escobar, a midfield of Lorenowitz, Heinemann, or Remedi, or the three of them. Gressel is in this mix. Barco, Pitti, Joseph. You've got the options to play a lineup. Let's see. If I'm going to play Motagua tomorrow and I want to go a version of a 4-3-3, if that's where my head's at, then it'll be Brad and goal. Okay, you want to go veteran on the left side and Honduras, Castillo, Robinson, Meza, Escobar. That's my back line. Midfield, I'm going to start Lorenowitz. I'm going to pair him with Heinemann, and I'm going to play... I like Barco as the 10, but I think Frank prefers Pitti in there, so okay, we'll put Pitti there. Barco on one wing, Gressel on the other, Joseph up top. That's your 4-3-3. Do you feel bad about that lineup?
Nope.
No. I don't think this team is in this crisis situation that some are trying to paint. I really don't know where that's coming from, because this is a team that can go into a series with Motagua. That's a team... Look, is that team better than the one that beat Club America in the Campeones Cup? I think it is. I think it's a stronger team. You know, that match, you had Dion Pereira playing a key role. You had Florentine Pogba playing a key role. This is a team that can get the job done. Now, can they get better? Yes, always. Any team can. But this is a team that can get the job done. They're looking to get better. They're looking to get deeper. I think you're going to see some young players come in and push this group. You could see another veteran. Adam John could be one of those guys that gives you something different and pushes this group. I think that's what you're looking for more than anything, is to increase the competition within the group for spots. You want to keep everybody strong. You want to keep training sessions intense. You want to continue to do that. It's not a concern about the starting 11. Even that 11, okay. So that's the 11 that I just went through. Who do you have on the bench in that scenario? You have Tito Villalba. You have, in the one I just did, you had Eric Remedi, Mo Adams. You have Brooks Lennon. You have Anton Walks. You have George Bello. And your backup goalkeeper. That's not bad.
Solid to me.
That's your 18. Now, beyond the 18, yes. And this is where you get into Tafka's point about the overall number. Who's left after that? Brendan Moore, George Campbell, Lagos Kunga, Luis Fernando. That's your 4, because that's 22. That's what you have right now. Okay. You have some injuries, some things happen, then yes, things are a little different. You need to add. But I don't think it's this case that you have to, and this is why I've kind of joked about hashtag Nagby replacement. You've got players who can play in these roles right now. Do you want to get better? Any team does. But you're good now. You're competitive now. You put that lineup against NYC, against Toronto, against Columbus, against the LA Galaxy, against LAFC, against Seattle. You're good. Can you be better? Potentially. And it's going to be what you can do in the market, because it sounds like there's still other moves that the club would like to make. I think every team's exploring. That's why I don't think there's a deadline. I think when you start working that way, you create trouble for yourself. And we mentioned this yesterday about Miami. Paul McDonough has doubled down on this again. You know, it's consistently that we will have our designated players. Paul McDonough told Michelle Kaufman of the Miami Herald yesterday, I don't think it makes sense to leave a designated spot for the summer. They'd play a full season until May, then tournaments like the Euros and Copa again. Now you're looking at getting them for 10 games, and I don't think that's what's best for the club. Not disagreeing with that. If you're looking at a a European national team player that'll be at the Euros or a South American national team player who will be at Copa America. Now, maybe this is giving you a hint at the scale of player that they're looking at, and that's a pretty good scale. But by making a deadline, which is essentially what you've done with what Paul McDonough said about Miami, you're backing yourself into a corner because the deal might not be there. Now, Miami's in a different situation. They've got holes. They've got a team that is not as strong as Atlanta, as Columbus, as New England, as Toronto, as New York City, as DC still got question marks. I don't know if I want to put them in this conversation. Miami, their roster might not be as strong as Orlando right now because they've got those two designated players up top that are going to put that team over the top. They've got a good core. They need to get things done now. But even them putting a deadline on it, you're making it more difficult to get things done. Atlanta's in a position where they can go into the season and be good. They can make trades within the league if they need to. They can bring players in all the way through early May and then again in the summer window. They don't want to have to wait, but you want to leave that negotiating possibility open. And we'll go down the road with Villasanti and Arzamendi and the Cerro Porteño situation. Look, they've come out in December and said that the club needs to sell players. They've got to bring in revenue. Okay, that's out there. Now, this is a club, and as Arzamendi's agent, or Villasanti's agent, and it's the same agent, I believe, unless something has changed. As Felipe told us in the first hour, Cerro Porteño is not an easy club to deal with. They're going to try to get the highest price possible. They've got a release clause set on Villasanti, according to his agent, of $6 million. They want to play hardball. Okay. So when you set a deadline, you're going to pay more because you're running up against your own deadline. Now, Atlanta, if that's the player they want, can play hardball their own. Now, you always run the risk of losing the player because it's a wide open market and somebody else can swoop in. But if you know the player wants to come to you, the player wants to make that move, you think they're the good fit, and you know the club needs to sell, you can back them up against the wall on that and say, yeah, okay, we can walk away. And then that future resale clause that we know you got a nice check when Miguel Almiron moved on to Newcastle that we helped make happen. We have a track record now. So for a Cerro Porteño, do you want to haggle over an extra $1 million, $2 million today? Or do you want to get as high of a price as you can and have a resale clause in there that this is a club that has shown they can sell players for maximum value? That's where you can push harder if you don't set an internal deadline. Atlanta can play both sides of it right now. They can look and they can try to bring in players today, but they don't have to. That's the best spot to be in.
And the last tweet on the board for the morning so far, actually there are two. One, Daniel wants to know when you and Mike get to drive in the Golden Spike.
Well, we're kind of busy at that time.
I was going to say, you're going to have to multitask a bit.
I mean, we'd have to have wireless headsets or wireless mics or
everything.
Then we'd have to hand off the mic as we're swinging the hammer. That might be hard.
And then public service announcement from GTUTD1. Tickets to the Atlanta United Birmingham Legion game went on sale. Single game tickets now available. So GTUTD says easy drive to and from the ATL games played at the newly built UAB Soccer Stadium. Let's fill it up with red/gold/black! ! It's
going to be a fun trip. We're looking forward to it. We'll be over there Friday night for something. Not sure exactly how this is going to look like, but we'll have some SDH content for you on Friday evening from Birmingham, and then we'll have the game on 92.9 The Game. Standard broadcast. We will have a half hour of pregame, an hour of postgame on 92.9 The Game for preseason coverage of Atlanta United. I'm excited to be able to do that. I'm glad there's a game we can do it. We had fun in 2018 heading up to Nashville to do this, and we'll be doing the same on February 8th.
So what else is on your mind this morning as we are in the last quarter hour of the show?
There's all kinds of stuff going on. So we have a little bit of that with Minnesota acquiring Ja'Cory Hayes from Dallas.
Yep.
I know we mentioned this recently going through Dallas's roster. Ja'Cory Hayes seemed like the odd man out. And it's an opportunity now for him to go into a Minnesota midfield that can use a little more depth. Minnesota is a team that there was a great interview with Adrian Heath on SiriusXM FC. He sat in at MLS Media Days with Tony Meola and Brian Dunseth. They had the show that day. And he talked about, look, they're not settling. They're not happy with where they are. They know that the competition in the Western Conference is only getting bigger, and that means they've got to do more. And Ja'Cory Hayes is a player who can come in and give them a different look in the midfield. You've got Osvaldo Alonso. You've got Jan Gregush. Hayes can play in a trio if you want to be defensively secure with that group, and then play a front line of Mason Toye, Kevin Molina, Robin Laud, or Ethan Finley. You've got some different things you can do here. You've got Thomas Chacon, who should be getting more time this season. Young Uruguayan they brought in as a young designated player. Didn't see much of him last year. They needed another body in that midfield. Now they've got it in Hayes. They need another number 9, and that's the one that they haven't been able to get done yet. Luis Amarilla is a player they've been trying to get from Vélez Sarsfield for a month, it seems. Heath told Meola and Dunseth that it was pretty much a done deal, and they were trying to get it over the line. It still hasn't gotten over the line. There was a rumor that popped up that Gremio was interested, but that feels like a false rumor because I don't think he's the kind of player they would be looking at right now. I think Gremio's looking bigger than Amarilla, so I think they can still get him, but what's the holdup at this point? Does he want to explore other offers? Is he pulling a Roger Martinez and say, yeah, I don't mind going to MLS, but I want to see if a European club comes in or somebody bigger comes in? How long do you want to wait on a player that's not 100% committed to you? Don't know. Minnesota needs to figure something out in this regard because I don't think you can go into the season counting on just Mason Toye, probably not Angelo Rodriguez, because he is being linked to a move to Colombia. Deportivo Cali in Colombia is reportedly after Rodriguez. Football Red is a website in Colombia. They are reporting that Deportivo Cali is looking at new options up top. Rodriguez is the most likely of the 3 scenarios they presented because of the cost, because of his availability. So now Minnesota could be going into the season with Mason Toye as their only number 9 on the roster. That's a problem. Luis Amarilla, if you can't get the deal done at this point, they're going to have... See, they're backed up into deadline mode, like Cincinnati had to do with Gaston Pereiro, and we haven't heard any update on that, which would make you think that it's not happening. So because you don't have depth already, because you haven't built your roster, they're going to get pushed into a deadline. They're going to get pushed into desperation mode, and they might make a bad deal because of it. That's the difference. Can Atlanta United make deals? Yes. Can they make deals to get better? Yes. Do they have to? No. Do they have to make a bad deal? No. Minnesota might have to make a bad deal. And that could mean paying more than you want to for Amarilla to make it happen, or starting fresh somewhere else and having to overpay. Because these other teams pay attention. Cedro Porteño, for example, can't play as much hardball with Atlanta because Atlanta can move on. Atlanta can opt not to make a deal. They can opt to go in a different direction. Minnesota doesn't have that type of flexibility in dealing with Vélez with Amarilla, because Vélez can look at Minnesota's roster and say, oh, You need somebody who can actually score, don't you? Oh, and Angelo Rodriguez is leaving. Well, you wanted to move on from him anyway, but you got one guy. You really need this player, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
You really like this player, don't you?
Yeah, so it's worth to you.
How much more are you going to throw in for us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, no, keep going. No, keep going. No, a little bit more, and then you're going to get into something like,
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
And that's what happens.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Then they move on.
Oh,
so
update out of Cincinnati, by the way.
Okay, give us a Cincinnati update.
Dutch newspaper Eindhoven Dagblad reported FC Cincinnati GM Gerard Nijkamp has ended talks
Yeah, they
with
set a
Gaston
deadline.
Pereira and his
set a
agent
deadline. He didn't want
overmoved
it.
from PSV.
Yep. They reportedly had agreed to the transfer fee. They couldn't agree on the contract. Contract was in front of him. They gave him a deadline. They extended the deadline. He doesn't want to come. You got to move on. You got to move on. And that's where you're at. So Cincinnati set a deadline. It came back to bite them. Now they've got to start over, and they're talking, I think, to a Swedish number 10 is what they're looking at. We'll see. But that's where you get into tough spots if you don't manage your roster construction effectively. And it's not just about one big name. It's not just about one new addition. It's about building your roster as a whole. That's why when people got, I think, a little worked up about Brooks Lennon coming in, Edgar Castillo coming in, now Anton Walk's coming in, those types of moves, it's like, oh, well, that's not what we're looking for. That's not a big deal. It actually is a big deal because it gives you flexibility across the board. It gives you the option, whether you're talking about, renegotiating a contract for Julian Gressel, you've got cover. If it doesn't work, you've got cover. You want to sign him, you want to keep him. That's been made abundantly clear in week 1 of Atlanta United's preseason. Doesn't mean it happens. Takes 2 to get the deal done. You have to find the number that works. But you've got cover. You don't have to make a bad deal. Now, on transfers coming in, same thing. You don't have to make a bad deal because you've got coverage. You can improve, yes. Those are 2 different things. But you don't have to make a bad deal to do it, because when teams get stuck and they make bad deals, in a cap league especially, you can ruin your salary cap. That can take years to recover from. In MLS, it's a little bit quicker than it is in other leagues, but still, it puts you behind the 8 ball, and then you're operating from a position of weakness. And Minnesota's in that situation right now. Cincinnati was in that situation because Gaston Pereira was like, you know what? I don't have to go there. I can go somewhere else. I can wait. I can stay at PSV. I don't have to go. So you're going to have to give me a lot more money to make me want to come. And they ended up not getting to that number. They could have really used a number 10 like that to be better than they were last year. Minnesota desperately needs a goal scorer because the rest of the Western Conference found some. Kansas City found one. Vancouver found one. LA Galaxy replaced one. So Minnesota, if you want to be in that elite level, you got to find somebody who can score. And now you're running out of time, and you're getting backed up against the wall because of your desperation. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. It's going to be fascinating as we get closer to the European window closing. Now, the South American windows will still be open in some countries, and you'll still be able to operate as normal in those countries. But clubs that are looking to shop in Europe want to get deals done sooner rather than later, because the later you get, and Aberdeen has made this point clear, and I think other clubs make this point clear too, for clubs that potentially could sell in this window, they want to do deals today. They want to do deals yesterday because it gives them more time to bring in a replacement. They don't want to wait till the last minute. Aberdeen talked about this in the sense of Scott McKenna, who had a great offer from him in the final hours of the transfer window last summer. They couldn't make the move because they didn't have cover. They didn't have somebody who could step in and play in his place. They needed to go find a replacement. They had a couple hours. They weren't ready to do that. Now, that's a little bit of a sign of weakness of Aberdeen, and it's something they have to get better at. Any club needs to avoid that situation as much as possible, but you want to do deals If you know you're going to sell, if you know you're going to need a replacement, you want to do deals earlier. And for MLS teams, the later it gets, the fewer options you're going to have. Once the European window closes, those clubs can't go get replacements. So the players you're looking at are guys who are on the outside of a squad, guys who are expendable. That limits your options. So I want to see what deals get done over the next week. I think you'll see a good number.
Let's see. Any other teams that have struck your fancy this morning?
Dom Dwyer said some stuff on MLS, soccer.com. He spoke to the media at the start of training camp yesterday. The quote that stood out to me was, I think I've got a point to prove.
Yeah.
Reportedly, he was shopped. Now, we don't know if that's true, but reportedly he was shopped in the offseason. He reads the rumors like everybody else. He's a pro. He knows that he had a bad year last year. He's got to take it to another level. If Orlando's going to reach the goals that they have, he's got to do more than he did last year. I think for his long-term future, he's got to do more than he did last year. Or his next contract is not going to be a great one. You know, he's got to perform. He feels that pressure. That's good. Real Salt Lake brought Kyle Beckerman back. You know, you hear Brian Dunseth, who covers Real Salt Lake locally in Utah, talk about Beckerman, and he's still one of the fittest guys in the team. I mean, the guy's coming back for his 21st MLS season, 14th Crazy. With RSL, and he's still one of the fittest guys in that team. He's a very important part of a team that needs that leadership, especially with Raimondo now retired. They need that veteran presence that Beckerman can give them, and he can still play, and he can still be an effective player in the midfield for that team. New England's got to go find another center back. Samba Kamara, his P1 visa application was denied, so his contract is now void because they can't bring him into the country. No idea why that happened, but the Revs need more cover at center back. Rumors, we mentioned the Seattle one, we mentioned the Angelo Rodriguez one. The Alex Castro situation's a funny one. So we talked about it last week, I think. He was linked to Orlando, gave an interview on radio in Colombia and said that Oscar Pareja knows him and he would be a good fit there and he's looking to make the move. Well, then Cruz Azul swooped in, and it sounded like, oh, well, no, he's going to Cruz Azul. Well, now you've got a report on Esto en Linea from Mexico, Ruben Beristain. He's reporting that Castro arrives in Mexico City to meet with Cruz Azul to get this deal done. And he shows up with a new agent, not the original agent. And the club walked away from the deal.
Peace out.
No idea what's going on. Like, no idea if he pushed the other agent out, if the other agent was up to something, if his new agent's up to something. Who knows? This stuff happens. And now it sounds like he might be available again. But do you want to deal with him because Cruz Azul just walked away? I don't know. We'll see where Alex Castro ends up. This could be a fun one to follow in silly season. So that's everything on the board right now. The LA Galaxy have not made an official announcement on Chicharito, even though he's photographed in their new kit and he's on the front of the sports section for the LA Times. Okay. I don't know how this happens, but all right. Oh no, we have another one. Hold on. Josh Sims rejoining the New York Red Bulls. He was on loan last year. They've brought him back. They did a video using The Sims, the fun game, The Sims. That's how they've introduced it. You remember The Sims, right?
Yeah, I do. I never played it, but I do remember it.
Yes. So they have used The Sims to introduce Josh Sims. Nice.
When was the last time that you've seen a P1 visa application denied?
I don't remember ever seeing one. Now, the Corey Burke situation was different. That was for a green card, and then they pulled his visa. So a little bit different situation. He had a visa. He was in the final stages of the green card, went for the interview, and then they pulled his visa. No idea why that happened either. That's a little different. This is just straight up like, no, you're not coming into the country.
It's like, nah.
So yeah, don't know.
Yeah, that was just it. When I saw that come across yesterday, okay, I thought that was a first for me, and that's why I wanted to ask if it was a first for you.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that one before. Actually, you know what? There was a player for the Red Bulls, but it was more like the Burke situation where he had played here and then was not allowed to come back. And, oh man, this was probably about 10 years ago. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick, because it was actually a pretty... Luke Rogers. It was 2012. It was actually a pretty good player for them. So... coming into the 2012 season, his P1 visa was denied. Now, he had played previously. So the Red Bulls issued a statement at that time. It was March 30th, 2012. His P1 visa application has unfortunately been denied by the U.S. government for now. We have spoken with Luke about potential options and have mutually decided that it would be in all parties' best interest to terminate his MLS contract so he could play elsewhere. Now, I don't remember the details on that one, but he had played here before. Kamara isn't getting approved to come play here, period. Like, his visa is just getting denied straight out of the gate.
That's why I asked. Figured I would throw that down. But one more quote to wrap up, at least from my part today. Quote, Josie has his opinions, end quote. Greg Vanney summing up.
Okay, I was wondering if you were going to say Toronto. Who said it.
I was going to have you guess, but yeah, it's Greg Vanney. When he was told what Josie said, Josie has his opinions.
He does. I mean, he does have his opinions. I don't know really what else Vanney could have said. I mean, Vanney can't come out and say, yeah, Josie's right.
Yeah.
Vanney, and he also can't come out and say Josie's wrong.
Well, no, Josie's wrong.
Yeah, you can't really go either way. So he found
he's going to say, yep, Josie has his opinions.
Yeah, he found an in between to try to get away with it. We'll
see.
Kind
of like the double adverb that Ali Curtis came in to begin the show with.
We will see. We will see how this goes down. I think there's going to be a little more fallout from it. Keep an eye on everything out of Los Angeles today. I mean, this will get officially announced like right about now, actually. They just posted it on their social media accounts. So their video is out, retweeting that from my account right now. It's official. Chicharito is in Major League Soccer, and this is a big deal. Keep an eye on all the media today, Spanish and English language, because this is potentially the biggest deal that MLS can make outside of a Messi or Ronaldo coming to this league. I truly believe that. There's other great players that have been linked to the league. There's other great players who've been in the league in recent years. I don't think any of them have the impact that this move does. Zlatan didn't have this impact, not across the board. Great players like a Luka Modric who's been linked. I don't think he has anywhere near this impact. David Silva, David Villa. I mean, we can keep going. A lot of great players linked and have been in this league. I don't think anybody has the impact on Major League Soccer that Chicharito can. It's that big of a deal. And it's that big of a deal in two different languages. And if you are looking at it from an English language perspective and you are questioning it in impact, you don't think it's that big of a deal, you're not paying close enough attention. And I'll be curious to see which outlets have that feel. You can question how effective he is. You can question how many goals he scores. All those things are completely valid, and they've been questions about his career from, honestly, his move to Europe, where he went very young to Manchester United. It's one reason why he hasn't broken through as a starter consistently at major clubs. This is not a guy who's been at small clubs. We're talking Manchester United. We're talking Real Madrid. Big-time spots that this player has been in. Does he come here and score as many goals as Zlatan? I don't know. Does he score as many goals as Carlos Vela, as Joseph Martinez? I don't know. But impact, nobody can touch the impact that Chicharito is about to have on this league. Nobody. Beckham opened the door. He created this potential. Different conversation about Beckham coming in 2007. in 2020, after you've had Beckham and others come through, this is the biggest move that MLS could make outside of Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo coming to this league. There is not another player. I don't think Neymar would have this effect. I don't. I think because of the unique nature of Chicharito being an icon to the largest Spanish-speaking population in your country that you are partnering with and doing lots of business with, and what a lot of your Spanish-speaking media in this country who dominate soccer coverage in this country is predominantly based in Mexico or from a Mexican appeal and is covering Liga MX at a big scale. Chicharito is the player that moves the needle more than anybody else this league could get outside of your best two players in the world and Messi and Ronaldo. And I know there are people who will disagree. And I'm just going to ask you to watch TUDN, to watch ESPN Deportes, to watch Fox Deportes, and watch the level of impact that Chicharito has. Watch what the crowd looks like in Houston on opening day. Watch some of these markets and watch some of the reaction that you get to this player. Not saying he's as good of a player as those guys. I'm talking about impact. Chicharito is a massive get for this league. Changes the trajectory of the 2020 season in a big way. It's going to be exciting to talk about. We'll have plenty more tomorrow on the show, 9 in the morning.
Hang on.
Oh, what?
Can you hit the current affairs stinger? Stephen Goff, DC United has just traded for Julian Gressel, exchange for money, more to come.
Well, there you go. That's a bigger deal in Atlanta here. So, that is from the Washington Post, and Stephen Goff does not often get these things wrong. So, we'll see what kind of money we're talking about here. We'll hang out for a little bit and see if more pops off immediately. I'm sure there's massive freaking out right about now.
Yeah, we've had people with interrogatives for the moment.
I see what with multiple exclamation marks from Ricky Ricardo.
And she.
Hey, I mean, this has been talked about. This has been hinted at. The Athletic reported that there were teams that were interested. You had that rumor pop up about Toronto that didn't seem to fit when you start to do the math. When you look at DC United and you look at their roster, we've been talking about it. They need help. Now, where he fits in DC United's an interesting conversation because in the attacking end of the field, you have Ola Kamara up top. You have Edison Flores, who can play as a 10, can also play out wide. You have Yamil Assad, who can play out wide. I think he could play as a 10, but he's predominantly played on the left wing. You have Paul Arriola, who has predominantly played on the right wing, has played centrally some, but has also played as a right back at times. Now, we've not... Actually, I need to look back at this because if I remember right, Ben Olsen experimented a fair bit with 3 in the back last year, and he hadn't done that as much previously. Let's see if I can pull this up real quick. Because if you're going to do that, that opens up the door potentially to using Julian Gressel as a wingback. And we know that's where he fits best. That's where he is, I think, best in this league, is as a wingback, some defensive responsibilities, but also a ton of freedom to bomb forward and put in crosses. And he's going to have a forward in Ola Kamara who can get on the end of those crosses. According to Who Scored, very quick glance, they played 3 center backs in various permutations 12 times last year out of 34. And I think most of those were later in the year. That could be a hint as to how he would fit. Now, how you make that work with Arriola, Assad, Flores, I don't know. Does he tuck into the midfield and play with Russell Canals, who's also played some right back towards the end of the season? Junior Moreno, you have Felipe in there. I don't think it actually clarifies a whole lot about DC other than you're getting a talented player. I don't know where he fits in. On the Atlanta side, now for money, it's going to be a lot
$1 million in various financials going to Atlanta, according to Goff.
So it's a Darlington Nagbe kind of deal. So various allocation monies. Now that opens up a couple things. So from an Atlanta perspective with a roster, you are looking at now a lot of allocation money to work with, and you had a lot of allocation money come in on the Nagbe deal, and we don't know how much additional allocation money you're spending right now, 2020 roster versus 2019. You can look at slots, you can take the 2019 roster and spending forward to 2020 and start to, do some math and figure out where things fit. But now you're adding $1 million in allocation money plus the previous $1 million from the Nagbe trade that we don't know how much of that was spent. You've got a lot of room. You've got some things to work with. And when you're talking about a Villasanti, which I don't think Villasanti's not a replacement for Gressel, but as we went through those lineups and we talked about what this team could look like today, you take Julian Gressel out of a 4-3-3 and you put Tito Villalba in there. That's what can happen here. That can be your change. Or there's another way to make that work. If you play a 4-3-3 and it is Barco and Pitti flanking Joseph and you're playing 3 central midfielders, that if you add a player and you've added the allocation money now to be able to add a player, definitely add a player, there's no question now, you can do that. Well, then you could play Barco and Pitti flanking Joseph, and you could have a central midfield of new player, maybe Villasanti, maybe somebody else, Emerson Heineman, Jeff Lorenowitz, or Eric Remetti, or Mo Adams. So you've created some different ways to make it work. You can play the traditional 4-3-3 with a number 10, either Barco or Pitti tucking in there with Villalba on the right wing. I don't think you're making this team worse by this, and you're potentially giving this team an option to get even better. Now, if you want to play 3 in the back, 3 center backs, and you're going to play wing backs, now you have Franco Escobar, who played wing back in the MLS Cup run in 2018. He can also play as a center back. You have Brooks Lennon, who can play as a wing back in that role. And I think it suits him very well. He's a different player than Julian Gressel. Crossing, not as strong as Julian Gressel. Gressel's one of the best in the league. But speed, more coverage, more ability to take players 1v1, I think Lennon can give you that. So he gives you a different look in that kind of role if you want to go there. I don't think this has changed what flexibility this team has in terms of tactics. I think in some ways it's actually increased the ability to go out and get a player to make this team better. It's going to be very interesting to see what dominoes we see from this now.
According to Stephen Goff, the sides apparently have been talking for the past 10 days. As a part of the deal, Gressel's salary goes from a base of $114 to more than $700,000. 4 years, unclear about options, according to Goff.
It's a big jump. That's a really big jump. It's maybe a little bit higher than I thought it would jump to. But DC has the ability to do that. I don't know if Atlanta in the cap could have made that work. I think it would have been difficult. I think it would have required another move. Now, we don't know all the information here on what the cap looks like because we don't know what kind of contract Fernando Mesa's on, for example. Is it a similar deal as Leandro Gonzalez-Perez to where basically there was a swap there in just the players in that spot? We don't know. Don't know if it's less, so that's freed up some money. We don't know if there's any allocation money that Atlanta can get out of the LGP deal. Don't know about that either. I think some people have assumed that there was, but there's no way to know that. So there's a lot of questions, but when you start to project things out and you start to guess on this, I don't know if they could have paid that kind of contract. And then you get to the next question of, do you want to pay that kind of contract? And those are tough decisions. Those are very tough decisions for a player who has blossomed under your watch, and a player who came in as a guy that I will always remember at the MLS Super Draft in 2017. Carlos Bocanegra spoke on Counterattack after the draft and said that they liked Gressel because he was a guy who they felt could come in and play minutes now, but was a versatile player and could be a depth piece in a lot of different roles. No one expected Gressel to be the player that he was. And that's a credit to him. That's a credit to what he did for this team. But now you're in a point where he's outplayed his rookie deal. He's going into the last year of his deal. He wants a long-term deal. He wants that security. I don't think he would have gotten it outside the league. I think he's shown his value inside this league. And you have teams that are going to be interested. And DC United, look, they've got a lot of openings. They had a lot of openings after last season. And he's a guy who could help them fill a number of those. I really do want to see how DC lines up, because as I start looking at it, I'm not exactly sure what they do with this. But they had the money to spend, both in terms of acquisition cost and in cap space. So this is an interesting one. I'm a little surprised. Actually, I'm not surprised by some of the reaction about, the massive freak out.
Yeah.
From an Atlanta perspective, and we'll get feelings out of it for a second. From an Atlanta United on the field perspective, what this does is this opens up playing time for Tito Villalba, because I don't think it was there for him before. I don't. I think if you were going into this season looking to play a 4-3-3, like we talked about, Gressel would have been on the right wing. I think you would have had to pencil him in over Tito. Well, now Tito's the guy on the right side. If you're going to play a traditional, kind of triangle midfield with a 10 in front of two holding midfielders. Now, you've opened up the opportunity for Tito in that section, and we know what he's done in this league. Now he's got to do it again, and that's going to be a big spotlight that's going to be shining here going into the season. But it also creates the opportunity, with allocation money to work with, to go out and get somebody. And you have the international spots to work with, so you've got a clean slate to go get somebody. Now the question, and has anything else come out about how that million breaks down?
Not yet.
Okay.
Still, I'm basically camped out on Goff's Twitter feed for more details. So when something does pop up, I'll let you know.
One question is, TAM has limitations. Remember, you can't use TAM and GAM in the same deal on a player. TAM has limitations. If a player's on a $2 million cap hit, for example, you can't TAM them down. You could GAM them down, because GAM doesn't have those limitations. Now, it's going to take a lot of GAM, because you got to bring that all the way down to underneath the 530,000. This is following 2019 CBA rules and roster rules that could be different. I don't think it'll be dramatically different. Is that number 600,000 or 700,000? Whatever. You're still going to need a lot of GAM. You can use GAM if the player you would bring in is more than the maximum cap hit, the maximum TAM amount. And again, we're assuming that TAM continues. That might not happen either. You can use a lot of allocation money to bring somebody in if you need to. You can. And you're going to have a lot of allocation money to work with. A lot. So I'll be curious to see if it's GAM heavy. My gut feeling is that it might be. And that's twofold. I mean, there are the questions about TAM in general, but the fact that I think GAM right now in the current rules is more valuable to you. If you want to go, if and let's follow down a thread, if Villasanti is going to cost you let's say you don't pay the release clause, which you'll probably be able to negotiate that down some. Let's say you pay $4 or $5 million, and you're going to sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal, and you're going to pay him probably not a gigantic salary, but that transfer fee is going to be a big chunk of his cap hit. Let's say you get him on a contract that's $300,000-$400,000 a year, but your cap hit is in the 1.3, 1.4 million. Well, you might have just paid for that essentially with this move. So we will see how this goes. What else do we have on Twitter? Because I'm sure there's been a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we do have folks who have commented this morning. Let me go back to the beginning of it. Shiva wanted to know what happened to waiting for the CBA.
Sometimes deals happen.
And if it's something in front of you that you can't resist, then you're going to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't think you can jump to a conclusion that, this is a situation where they lied. That's the stuff where I think people get bent out of shape here. If this was the amount that was being asked for, and this is where you were down to, and it was a little pricey for you, and we don't know these things yet, but if it was a little rich for you, and you were hoping that maybe the CBA would give you more flexibility, sometimes price tags get up too high to where you got to take it. And again, this comes to a point where this opens up a possibility for Tito Villalba to play more, which was something that a lot of people have had concerns about. This opens up a possibility for you to go get a player that a lot of people have asked for in Villasanti, or someone like him. This gives you the ability to do those things. I don't know if you had that ability before. Not if you kept Tito and Gressel and paid him this type of salary. I don't think you could have pulled that off. Not if you kept everything as is. Now you've got the flexibility. You've got a spot for Tito to try to earn, and you've got the money to go out and get a player in a different position that has been identified as one of need.
Tafka has been a part of the discussion. He says it makes Atlanta look a bit cheap. Got his services way undervalued.
No, whoa. I'm going to push back hard on that because I'm seeing that from other people too. No, it does not make Atlanta United look cheap at all. This was a player, and this is what you have to remember. His value, his contract is not tied to what he did in 2019 or 2018 or 2017. His contract was tied to the bargaining position he had when he signed it before he had played a professional game. Period. The pushback that Atlanta United didn't pay him enough, that's not how this works, guys. It's not how any of this works. He signed a contract when he had no leverage. He was a player coming out of Providence College who had a good college career. He was a player who did not sign a professional deal coming out of German academies, came to Providence, played well, played very well, played very well in the combine. His draft stock rose very quickly. He was picked higher than anyone had him projected. There was not a mock draft that had him number 8.
Nope.
He was not projected to come in here and play the minutes that he did. That's why he signed the contract that he did. He signed a 3-year deal, which was pretty rare, to be honest, for players coming in with that projection. Most players picked where he was projected don't even get a 2-year deal. Go back and look at last year's draft. Go back and look at guys that had options not picked up after 1 year in the league. Go back and look at that before you say that Atlanta's cheap or didn't sign him to a proper deal. No. They signed him to the deal that he had the leverage for at the time that he signed it. And he got more security than most players in that situation have gotten in MLS history. The length of that deal surprised me. I thought it would be a 2-year deal with an option at the larger end of it. I would have never guessed that it was a 3-year deal with an option. I was surprised by that. Now, the longer-term deal, what does that do? Gives you more security, gives you more time to show what you're all about, also locks you into a salary number for a longer period of time. That's good for the club. That's the trade-off. You want more years, you're probably going to take less money. That's pretty typical across every sport, right?
Yeah.
You want that extra security, you're going to pay for it and not bringing as much money home. So no, it's nothing to do with Atlanta United being cheap. And then to say that they're not going to pay that amount, start doing the math. You cannot say that Atlanta United is cheap. Also, with saying that Atlanta United needs to go get Villasanti and Arzamendia and needs to play Tito more, and then start doing the math. How do you make all that work? You can't. You can't. Not in a cap league. That's impossible. So, I thoroughly disagree with anything about this being a bad look for the club, saying they don't care about fans, saying they're cheap, any of these things, saying they didn't want to reward a player. All that is not coming from a logical perspective of looking at what this team needs. And you can't say that they need to go get a bunch of players, but they also need to pay this amount too for this player. When you start to do the math and you start to look at the lineups and you start to look at the depth charts and you start to look at what you can do with this player, without this player, you have more options to make this team better after this move than you did before. You have more money to work with. You have more playing time to work with. You have more flexibility. Now, you have to go out and make the deals to make this worth it. And if Gressel goes and has a great year or 2 or 3 or 4 in DC, yeah, it puts the pressure on. Absolutely. That's the game. That's the business. And it's a business. And the flip side, my question would be, and there's no way to know this because nobody's in on the negotiations, but everybody's going at the club on this. My question would be, were there any concessions for signing a lower deal than what he's getting at DC to stay? To stay at the club that picked you higher and gave you an opportunity and gave you a longer-term deal than anybody's gotten coming out of the draft in that kind of spot? I don't know. There's no way to know. Again, there's no way to know these things. But it's all been very one-sided with this reaction, and I think you need to take a step back. Julian Gressel's been an outstanding player for this club and an unexpected star. An unexpected top contributor. And a player who's been very important. And these moves happen. When new contracts start to come in the mix in a salary cap league, you can't just pay everybody. You have to start making tough decisions. And long term, this is not about one player, one number. This is about the club and its long-term future. Would you rather have players be re-signed and stay and make the club have less flexibility to get better? Or do you want the club to be as good as it can possibly be? And that's going to be a question for people to ask themselves. It's a tough spot. Look, you get attached to players. You get attached to players, especially guys in this situation who you've watched grow up and watched turn into a star. Perfect world, they stay at a club for their whole career. How many times does that actually happen? Not often.
Rarer
and that's worldwide.
rarer as we go.
It's extremely rare worldwide. So it's going to be an interesting one. So again, to recap, $1 million in various financials going to Atlanta United.
Mm-hmm.
The deal for Gressel's contract, he goes up from his rookie deal to $700,000 plus. That's going to have to be allocation money down unless he's going to stay as a designated player for DC. It doesn't really matter because they have the flexibility. If he's a DP for now, they can buy him down if they want to add anybody. 4 years, unclear if there's options past that. So it is a long-term commitment to Julian Gressel by DC United for a lot of money. That's a bold move for DC.
Yeah.
So we will see. This is going to be very, very interesting because now, and this is what jumped out to me at it. You know, the hypotheticals started very early on about, and this is after the Sam Stejskal Paul Tenorio piece, that LGP was potentially on the move or on the market. Tito Villalba was potentially on the market. Julian Gressel was potentially on the market. LGP and Villalba outside the league, Gressel inside the league. You start thinking about, okay, how does this work? What could you get here? What kind of price tag could you get here? The Gressel one was the hardest one to figure because, I mean, I'm trying to think in MLS's modern era of the TAM world of a player who's been in this spot, who came in as a draft pick and not a Generation Adidas level pick. I'm talking a senior out of college. Has had the impact that Julian Gressel has had, and then commanded this type of return in a trade, and also this type of raise. You know, you look back at the draft, and I don't think there's a precedent here. Omar Gonzalez is one you think of. He left the league from the LA Galaxy. Now, they probably got a decent return, I think. I have to even go back and look at that. I don't know if he played his contract out. I'm trying to think of other draft picks in recent years, and that's honestly even further back than I would have went, that have had this type of impact. So the amount that you could have gotten when you start thinking about it, you know, you look at what LGP might command. Tito was a tough one because he's had a couple of down years. You didn't really know what kind of price tag he could command. Gressel, I didn't even know where to potentially start. You know, I think this type of price tag was what you hoped for. And I'm not talking about his contract. I'm talking about what the club is getting for him. This is probably about where you were hoping. I don't know if you could have went into it and expected it for sure. So, is it a tough spot because you're seeing a fan favorite go to another club? Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with you know, feeling bad about that. Yeah, you wish that he could have played his whole career here. You wish that he could have continued to do what he's done here. But you can't sign players to deals that you're not comfortable with. You've got to make the 11/18/30-man roster the best you can possibly make it. And if you have multiple pieces in one position and you need pieces in another position, this is what you have to do sometimes. Now, yes, they went out and added Brooks Lennon. Again, like we said early in the show before this came out, it gave you flexibility. It gave you flexibility to not have to do deals that you're not comfortable with. And this seems like a deal that the club didn't want to do in terms of the salary amount. It's not about that salary being too high, too low, or anything based off what he's done previously. It's what you think he's going to do. And I mean, John, we've talked about this in all sports many times over the years. You see teams that usually get in trouble in these situations pay off what a player's done in the past. Mm-hmm. You can't sign contracts that way. You have to sign on what you think they're going to do over the lifespan of that deal. And this is a big amount of money to a player over 4 years that you would expect to do more than he's done here already.
Yeah, I mean, there are contracts and teams across sports that are going through my mind about how you're hamstringing development of teams and things like that. Look at the Atlanta Falcons and how they paid Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, but you do that and you leave yourself susceptible, and you have problems with the offensive line. And if you can't keep your high-priced quarterback upright, and then he can't complete passes to the high-priced wide receiver. So you look at the New England Patriots and them paying Tom Brady what they are. Then you have injuries and cap issues there, and you can't give him the support that he needs so they can continue to be world champions. Felipe has come out this morning since we had him on the show. His reaction, he says, a significant decision from Atlanta United's front office, who had said publicly that Gressel was a priority. The ROI will certainly benefit Atlanta's future roster build, and Gressel gets his raise. And Felipe ends it this way. He says, but the message is clear. Gressel was not indispensable in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have zeroed in on the priority thing. It doesn't mean that he wasn't. That's, I think, something that you have to understand here is that, yeah, can absolutely be a priority, but doesn't mean that you're going to sign a bad deal. And we go back to the thread of today, it seems like, about having leverage as a whole with the way you build your club. Atlanta United has done a good job from day one of having leverage and creating leverage. They haven't had to sign bad deals for your cap, pay bad transfer fees. They haven't had to make desperation deals. Now, this is the first time that it's come up in terms of making a re-signing to this degree.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time we've had this aspect of it. But it's the same thing. Because of the deals that they have made, because of the way they've built this roster, they have flexibility. And honestly, they had flexibility before they added Brooks Lennon. Because if you'll remember, when we went through what a 4-3-3 lineup would look like, Brooks Lennon was on the bench in the way that I initially did it. And I had Julian Gressel as the right winger. So the change now would be Tito Villalba on the right wing and Brooks Lennon still on the bench in a 4-3-3. Now, in a 3-5-2, you can look at it a couple different ways. If you want Escobar as a center back with Meza and Robinson, okay, you've got Lennon as a wing back. If you want Escobar as that wing back, you've got Walks as a potential center back. You've got Lorenowitz as a potential center back. So you've got both possibilities. You've got cover. You've got, again, leverage. You can do the best deal for the club, not out of desperation, not out of sentimentality, not out of anything other than what you think is best for the long-term future of the club. And that's what they've allowed themselves to do here. So that's the harsh reality of pro sports sometimes, is you have to have people at the club. How many times have we talked about this worldwide? When you hold on to guys too long, go ask Nick Khalifi about Milan.
Yes.
Go ask Manchester United fans. Go ask, I think Arsenal fans would fall into this too. And I mean, they held on to Arsene Wenger too long, but still player stuff too.
Yeah.
When you hold on to things out of a position of sentiment as opposed to the sometimes harsh reality of your situation, you can do a lot of damage.
No, yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, you look at, you mentioned managers who have stayed too long. You look at coaches who've stayed too long. You look at players who are paid profoundly exorbitant contracts, and you're hoping that what you're paying them up front will give you the rewards up front, and then you can just kind of sit and deal with what's going on the back end of a contract. Once again, you just look at the Angels and what they're having to deal with Albert Pujols, and then having to sign Mike Trout, and then what else? Who else is going to be there? Who are you going to get? Sure, you can score runs, but who are you going to get to perhaps be on the pitching mound to keep the other team from getting them? So you have too many situations, and you're dealing with something in a salary cap league, and you can't just think about next year. You have to think about next year right now. You have to, at the same time, you've got to be dealing with two separate lanes of traffic. You've got to deal with the here and now, but at the same time, you have to look at next year, 2 years down the line, and how things may be with a CBA, may not be with a CBA. You have to kind of protect your flanks here. And that's what Atlanta United is doing with the deals that they're making is that the word that you've mentioned in this last half hour, leverage. You're giving yourself a position of strength when it comes to bringing in players, regardless of who they are and where they're coming from, that can help you continue to succeed. You don't want to be caught paying too much for something and being on the back end of the bell curve. That's the bottom line.
Yep. And these are where it's really hard to know the full picture because of the way rosters and allocation money and transparency with all of this with the league. This is where it's really hard to know all of the details. And this is not even getting into the negotiation side of it. It's not even getting into what Atlanta's top limit was and what they would pay and what they could fit, because we don't know. There's no way to know. We don't know how much allocation money is there now. We know there's a lot more. And we know, at least we think, there was probably a good chunk already. So you've got the ability to go out and make some splashes, which is something that people have been yelling about a lot. And that's what that's what I would just remind people of at this point, is that because of this move and because of the way it's happened, I think you can make a safe assumption that based off the cap, you had limitations in what you could do going forward. You had limitations on how many players you could add, what kinds of players you could add, how big of a player you would add. I think you were starting to hit a wall, whether it's cap related, whether it's not enough allocation money, whatever. Now you freed that up. You freed that up in a big way. And without hurting your team in terms of now you have a big hole. You don't. That's what's really impressive about this. Now, you can argue, and it's going to be a time you're going to have to wait and see, have you created a big hole? Brooks Lennon would disagree. Tito Villalba would disagree in terms of the different roles that Julian Gressel can play. I think your central midfielders, if that was a possibility, would disagree too. You have players of pedigree who are now in those roles, period. Whether it's right back, which was not a position Gressel played on, and except for one start in his time here as a true right back in a line of four. You've got cover there. You've got cover at right wing back. You've got cover as an 8, which is where we've seen Gressel play. You had 10s that would have played anyway. You've got cover on the right wing, which was another spot that he could have played, especially in a 4-3-3. You've got cover in all those. And it's not untested cover. It's Tito Villalba, who is another fan favorite, who is a player who was looking at probably not a ton of minutes in 2020 as things were constructed coming in. If you get 2017 Tito Villalba,
yes,
if you get that level of impact back, now you got to get that back. And that's a big question mark. But if you get that 2017 Tito Villalba, what he did when he was fully healthy and was no limitations on playing time, that was one of the best players in the league. Now, he's got pressure to perform now that maybe wasn't there before. Now it's there. Because it's not just judging him on what he did in the past here. It's judging him on the shadow of what Julian Gressel did. Because those moves could be tied together depending on how this lineup shakes out. Brooks Lennon, I think he had pressure anyway with a move. Now, yeah, there's going to be more pressure. There's going to be pressure from the fan base. I hope people are not going to hold things against Lennon or Villalba if they're getting this playing time because Gressel's not here. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it does, I think it's very unfair. These are two players with pedigree. These are two players who have produced in this league. You now have the potential to make this team better than we thought they could even this morning before this happened. We wondered if you could get the deal done. Now you have a lot more room to get a deal done on a Villasanti or a player of that ilk. You're able to do that now when maybe you weren't before. We don't know. That's again, I've said it, I think, every day on the show's history is, we wish we knew those things a little bit more. We wish we had more information. You don't. The salary cap's a mystery. The allocation money amounts are a mystery. So maybe you had less flexibility than I thought they did. Well, now you don't. Now you definitely don't. And you can make the team better in a spot where people have said you need more options. Frank DeBoer said it. He wants another central midfielder. Now you're going to have the ability to go get one. You're going to have the spot, you're going to have the playing time, you're going to have the ability, and you have guys that I think it's safe to say you believe in can fill the loss of a Julian Gressel. So it's going to be fascinating. I'll be curious to see what is said by the club at the next media availability. I'll be curious to see what is said by Julian Gressel at his first media availability from D.C. Now, this is still in the reported stage, but Stephen Goff generally doesn't report something like this unless it's done. So that's where you're at. That's a interesting way to close out the show, huh?
Yeah. Show goes long, but that's because we can.
It's crazy. Yeah, Unite Chop Rise has a good one here. He says, you thought hashtag Nagby replacement was bad. Atlanta United Twitter is currently in the 6th level of hell. Nice. Boy.
And Tafka has come back as well as a part of the discussion.
Yeah, please do.
So,
I'm sorry if that came off like I was specifically going at Tafka, because I saw that repeated a lot of places. I just wanted to speak my position on that.
No, but he's got a what we may do. You want to save Tafka's pushback for the morning, or do you want to come back with him right now?
We're rolling.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. He says, every player moves on, I know that, but not every player moves on at the same time, all in caps. LGP, Nagby, Gressel, Vasquez, Parkey, Ambrose, all gone in the same season. So now he's going to push back at you a little bit.
But hold on.
You said it yourself.
Hold on. All very different situations. You're lumping them all together, and they're all, expansion draft, retirement. It's all kinds of different things. Look around at other teams in the league and how many moves they've made. Atlanta's not an outlier here. Now go ahead and push back.
Okay. He's going to push back.
Okay.
You said it yourself. Nobody knows how much money we have to work with. TAM, GAM, DTAM, we don't know. Mm-hmm. But Gressel gave us DP numbers at 115,000. Awesome. And to keep a DP producer at 700,000 should have been made to happen, especially for a versatile player like Gressel. Paragraph 2.
Hold up. Should have been made to happen according to Tafka.
Yes.
Not according to, and assuming this is happening, and not according to the club. That's an opinion. Tito Villalba's 2017 was designated player level production. Absolutely. No question about that. Brooks Lennon, can he produce at that level? That is a question, and we will see. He might not even be in the starting lineup. That's the thing, and that's the assumption that I think people are jumping to. That is why I would say hold up a minute, because this is not a deal in a vacuum. What if you add designated player level production at a different position that you didn't have before? What if you do that? That's the knock-on effect here. That's why you can't look at moves in isolation. You can't lump unrelated moves together either. You can look at the offseason as a whole, and it's not done yet. Or you can look at direct moves that have an effect. This is obviously a move to create something. You're not stockpiling allocation money for nothing. You're not sitting on it for nothing. You're going to do something with it. It's a little hard to judge this move until you see what you're doing with it. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Keep coming at me, Tafka. It's all good.
Okay. So here we go. Paragraph 2. So it was a matter of, thanks we got it on the cheap, but that's not wrong. But not wanting to keep the player and his production for still a relatively, in quotation marks, cheap deal is not a good look. To me, it looks cheap, and I don't believe that's an illogical opinion.
I do, though. And it's just me. It's my opinion. And trust me, I think I'm in the minority in this one. I think when you don't re-sign a player, it doesn't automatically make a team look cheap. When you don't re-sign a player to this much of a raise, it doesn't make a team look cheap. Let's talk about Let's do a little bit of math here.
I was going to say, Taka did some math in paragraph 3. If you
okay,
want.
There's more. Go ahead.
We vacated the salary of LGP,
Yep.
$800,000. Parkey, $250,000.
Hold up. You can't, again, lump everything together when you're talking about Parkhurst and players who are on TAM deals. Now, this gets back to us not knowing everything, and it makes it complicated, and that's my number one caveat with all of this. The team obviously knows this stuff, and they know what they're doing with it, and you've got capologists, and you've got people figuring these things out, and you've got people figuring out how much impact you're getting out of each dollar you're spending on salary. Far better than any of us are doing. But you can't just say you've created this salary, okay, you can just pay him whatever. Because it's twofold. Do you have the money to spend? Maybe. You might. We don't know for sure. You might. But that doesn't mean you should just do it. That's the assumption. And that's the assumption that a lot of people are going to have. And I get it. The assumption is you should just pay him, period. Doesn't matter. It's a lot of money. Doesn't matter. He's done a lot for you in the past. And that's true. That is true. He has had 3 really good years here in Atlanta.
Not disputed. Nope.
He has had 3 very strong years. You're talking about a 4-year deal that takes him to 30. You're talking about a 4-year deal that at the end of it, you don't know if there's an option of it, that takes him to 30 years old. He's 26. That's a lot. And that's getting to an age where do you think he's going to be at that level at 30? You don't know. He could be. Might not be. You don't know. So it's not about what he's done before in terms of a new contract. It's not. It's about what you think he's going to do in this contract that's on the table. Do you think in 4 years at 30 he is going to be as effective as he was at 24? Generally, no. There are outliers, but that's how you're thinking about it. It's not about the past. It's not
an attaboy contract.
It's about what happens going forward. You can't do attaboy contracts because they get you in trouble. Let's look at players who are in that kind of range. We'll start at 7-10. All right, Josh Sims was on that type of dollar figure according to the MLS Players Association salary guide. I think Gressel was more effective than him. Paul Arriola, $707,000. It's debatable.
Same neighborhood.
Different kind of player, though. I'm talking about in terms of the player. It's a different kind of player. Bakary Sagna got a little bit of the attaboy deal for Montreal. They also had to do it because they needed him in a bad way. Luciano Acosta was on $700,000. I think in his contract at DC, he outperformed that by a large margin. Dax McCarty, very different kind of player, different kind of role. He was on $700,000 last year. Little hard to compare. You're getting leadership, and he's going to Nashville, and he's going to be their first captain, so you're getting a lot of that you're paying. Osvaldo Alonso, just under $700,000. He was more impactful to Minnesota than Gressel was to Atlanta last season. Period. And that was a new deal with Minnesota. That was year 1 of it. Graham Zusi was $688,000. He's been on a contract for a while. And maybe people would argue, and I think some Kansas City fans have, that he's not giving you that level of production now.
Yeah.
Maybe he did before. Justin Merrim was on a $678,000 deal. And again, Atlanta didn't pay all that last year. Justin Merrim has had double years in the league. Justin Merrim also got this kind of return in a deal from Columbus to Orlando ahead of 2018. So that's about the ballpark. Matt Beasler's on 674, Francisco Calvo 672, Jamiro Montero was on 671. Sergio Santos was expected to do more than he did for Philadelphia. I think they overpaid for what they got at $668. Christian Ramirez, Angelo Rodriguez, 2 forwards, both in that $667,000 range. Nagbe was previously on $665. I'll be curious to see what a new deal looks like for him, because that was reportedly something that was wanted. Jordi Reyna was $713 going the other way. Carlos Fierro was signed late. We'll see what he does this season. He's on $713. Let's see. Edwin Giassi from Dallas. That was a bad signing. Giancarlo Gonzalez, center back, $719. Andres Rios, who didn't perform up to $729 last year, will be looked at to do that this year. Roman Torres was $740. That's the range you're talking about in terms of this. You could argue that there's a lot of players in there that have given their clubs more value than Gressel. You could also argue that there's players in there that are overpaid. That happens. It's not an easy thing to project out when you're talking about a 4-year deal, and Gressel's just a unique case. There's not a comparison for what he's done in outperforming a rookie deal when nobody expected him to. Period. That makes this more complicated, and it makes it harder to price out. Atlanta felt like they could get more impact for the money elsewhere and bring in a big return, which is always part of this. And you always have to factor that in. What's the return? What do you do with the return? Because you can't let guys play contracts out. You can't risk it. And if you can't get a deal done at a number you're comfortable with, you've got to move on and get the maximum return so you can make the club better. I still don't think that makes the team look cheap.
Tafka in paragraph 3 listed all of the outbound folks with their salaries and just outbound folks with question marks. He says we brought in $1.75 million likely in AM. We've signed Meza, Heineman, Lennon, and Castillo.
Yeah, and we don't know Meza, what that number is going to be. It's going to be TAM, you know that. So is it to the level of LGP? Don't know. No way to know until things are published. So that one could be basically a like for like, or saving a little bit of money here, but not a ton. Do you have some other money to work with? Sure. But again, it's not even about 2020. When you're talking about re-signing a guy for a 4-year deal, it's about what they do in year 3, year 4. Are you on the hook? Did you maybe sign too long of a deal? Do you wish you had a way out? Happens a lot. You have to factor that in. You can't just do 2020. When clubs look short-term, they get themselves in trouble. You're not signing him to a 1-year deal. You're signing him to a 4-year deal. He wants a longer-term deal. And I would assume that when he signed his original contract, security was a big part of it. That's why it was a longer-term deal than most players in that draft spot get. And most college seniors get, period. I mean, it was a deal with the security along the lines of a Generation Adidas deal. And he wasn't looked at as that player coming out of college. Now, he might have traded less money for more guaranteed years. Don't know that for sure, but the fact that his contract is an outlier, I think it's a safe assumption. So I think there's a criticism of the club for signing him to a contract that was honestly a very generous one when he was signed, because you didn't know he would be the player that he was. Nobody knew that. Nobody guessed it because nobody projected him in the single digits in the draft. So that's all part of this. That's why it's hard. That's why it's complicated. And that's why people get paid a lot of money to make these tough decisions, because no matter how you feel about it, it is a tough decision to sign him to a 4-year deal at that kind of money. It's also a tough decision to move on. Puts pressure on the season. I think what Felipe said is correct. It's a big decision. It's a very big decision. And it's one that people will be judging and coming up with all kinds of opinions about and comparing, and you have to in these kinds of moves. That's part of it. But this is not a move in isolation. I think that part's obvious if you take a step back. There's going to be another player who comes in, especially using the allocation money that you now have. So that's the tough parts of this game. It's the tough parts of pro sports. Players come and go. Players you get attached to, young players especially, come in and do really well, and then it's time for them to get paid. And that doesn't always happen at the club they started at. And that's the hard part. So we will see where this goes. Is there anything else we need to hit before we finish a 3-hour show?
Goff's first draft of the article is out over at the Washington Post. Couple of other things, just the main paragraph, I guess the body of the article. Gressel 26 was locked in a contract dispute with the 2018 MLS Cup champions. With 1 year left on his original deal, he was seeking a pay raise from the $114,000 he earned last season. Reinforced the number, the more than $700,000 annually for 4 years. Additional details were not immediately known. United officials said they did not want to comment. So that is where we are.
Did he say which United officials didn't want to comment?
Nope, just United officials in general.
Yeah, well, that would cover both. I'm
assuming
DC.
Yeah, so the hometown writer. But yeah, United officials said they did not want to comment. The LA Galaxy have officially sent out the press release about signing Javier Hernandez.
Yep, it's a busy day. It's only going to get busier. So,
and we went an extra hour, and it didn't feel like it at all.
No, it didn't. I'm going to grab some lunch now, and we will see what happens when things are done officially. Be on the lookout over at 92.9 The Game for some updates there, and you guys know who to follow at this point. Make sure you're following all the Atlanta Soccer All-Stars who are going to be all over this because there's going to be a lot of different angles to it. It's going to be a busy day in the Atlanta United Twitter sphere, and I see that it already is. So I'm going to go get my fire retardant suit on after lunch, and we'll see what happens.
Mooch a third hour, y'all.
Yeah, seriously. Thanks, y'all, and thanks for sticking with us, and thanks for listening. And please give your opinions. Hey, I want y'all to remember this. I'm giving you an opinion. I don't know everything, and I don't claim to. I'm telling you how I see it. I'm telling you what I think about it. If you disagree, please do. And think about why. That's the only thing that I always try to challenge you guys with who listen is let's go past a hot take, and if you disagree, get into why.
Yes.
Take a step further than the emotional reaction, because anybody who has followed this team, is sad to see a player who's had this much impact go. That's obvious. That's the emotion of it. Take a step past that and think about why you like the deal or why you don't like the deal. And go that step further. We'll talk about it a lot more in the morning. We'll see if it's done, if it's made officially today. We'll see what happens. Follow all of it. There's going to be a lot of MLS talk all day, both in Atlanta and nationwide, with Chicharito being official, which is a good thing across the board. We'll see how it all shakes out. We'll be back in the morning. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha third hour, y'all.